join in, just drop us your name and where you're joining us from. We'd love to know a little bit more about everyone who's here. Okay, hi Vikash. Hi Jill. You are joining us from the US. Great. Hi Prateek. Hi C. Hi Ruhali. Wow. Hi Kristen. Hi Rushali. Hi everyone. Anshu, hi, someone from Costa Rica, someone from Somalia. Amazing. Wow. Hi. Okay. Okay. So great. We are now live on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And we have more participants joining us from all over the world again. So, very, very warm welcome to everyone. Uh, yeah, more introductions coming in. I'm sorry, I'm not able to individually read them out all. It's amazing to have such a lively bunch of audience here. We're very, very excited for the session. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Ananya. I would be hosting the workshop on behalf of Simplilearn. We have a super amazing workshop planned with an amazing guest, so please do stay tuned. So yes, we have a couple of ground rules that we request everyone to follow. Number one, please drop any questions you have in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. We keep getting a lot of messages in the chat box, as you can very well see already. So we might end up missing your message. So please, you do use the Q&A box effectively. Do not keep posting repeat questions, as we are going to try to address all your queries. That said, if you have any issues while following along with our expert today, or if you have any doubts that need to be immediately addressed, you can post them in the chat box. Secondly, avoid sharing any external links or personal details on the chat box and keep conversations relevant to the topic only. We'll be strictly monitoring this, and we'll be removing any irrelevant messages. And finally, for those who participate in the session till the end and give us your full name in the poll that we'll be launching at the end of the webinar, we will be able to provide an attendance certificate that you can share on your social media, add on your resume, and even update on LinkedIn. Please know that this is a 3-hour workshop, and we will be, sharing the poll at the end of the workshop only. So please do stay tuned till the end. We will unfortunately not be able to take any manual entry. So if you don't submit your name in the poll, then unfortunately we might not be able to provide you with the certificate. Right. Okay. So just curious to know, now that we have so many participants here, has anyone attended a Simplilearn webinar before, or is it your first time? Do let us know in the chat. We'd love to understand a bit more about our audiences. Um, okay, we have introductions still coming in. Yes, okay. First time, someone said that they were here the last time. Okay, thank you, Pratik. I hope you are having good takeaways from the sessions. Okay, a lot of you are saying that it's the first time, first time, first time. Wow, amazing. We have a lot of first timers. So please allow me to quickly brief you about Simplilearn and what we do. We provide certifications and career-aligned learning paths in various categories like GenAI, machine learning, data science, project management, agile and scrum, business analytics, and a lot more. We have helped 8 million plus people in their career growth across 150 plus countries with more than 50 partnerships. And speaking of partnerships, you can see the array of our esteemed partners here. The programs that we develop and provide are in association with prestigious institutions like IIT Pravartak, XLRI, Michigan Engineering Professional Education, UCSD Extended Studies, as well as leading organizations such as Google, Microsoft, and IBM. But something that's very close to our heart, what we're really proud of, is how our programs have been able to impact the careers of our learners. We have more than 80% graduate rate, with learners rating our programs 4.8 on 5 and reporting a 50% salary hike. This really shows the kind of learning experience and dedicated guidance that we've been able to provide. And yes, speaking of dedicated guidance, we are at the most exciting part of the session where I get to introduce our guest speaker. When we talk about AI, a lot of conversations, stay at a high level, or it stays extremely technical. But today, this session is all about learning, from someone who actually lives at the intersection of both. Timothy has spent years building and leading real systems in high stakes environments, from healthcare operations to applied AI products. He's worked closely with multidisciplinary teams, understands how decisions play out in the real world, and today he's building human-centered AI tools through his work at AI Handyman as the founder of AI Handyman. What I really appreciate about Tim's perspective is that he doesn't, for him, I think AI is not, about just the hyped things. It's not just about the theory. He treats it as something that has to be ethical, practical, and usable by real people solving real problems. So in this session, I don't think there can be a better guide leading us through the workshop. Tim, very, very glad to have you and host you once again. It'll be great if you can say your hi to all the participants here and add on to that introduction if you'd like to.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. So, absolutely. I worked in hospital operations for 18 years. So, I also worked in an emergency room in that. So, what that brought me, what skill wise to this skill set, is that we had to solve problems quickly. So, when I switched careers to AI and started learning program 2 or 3 years ago, I understood that yes, it's a complicated process sometimes, but we have to actually figure it out in a way that we can then solve problems. So I've taught a lot and I've taught through Simplilearn a couple times. So I've taught a lot of coding over the last year or so. And so I think that today I'm going to help break it down into very digestible bits so that we can take the coding outside of the learning environment and actually start building in a way that you can use the tools in real life to solve real problems. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to help break down what seems kind of like a overwhelming barrier to actual coding and use things like vibe coding and these new tools that we're lucky to have these days in order to get more people on board with actually building AI programs and actually using them in real workflows instead of just practicing in education environments.
Perfect. I think that was a perfect introduction to the session as well, Tim. Thank you so much for that. We'd love to start the session with, taking a moment to reflect on why we are all today. So we'd love to know from the participants, like, what is your number one reason for joining us today? A, you're looking to build AI tools as part of your current role, or B, are you exploring the possibility of a career switch into AI? Or C, do you just want to understand the potential of what can be built with AI? Or D, you're looking for a structure, a built framework because you've been improvising up until now. Let us know your answers so that, we can sort of try to navigate the session to, to all your requirements. Okay, C and D, someone is exploring. John, you're exploring career switch into AI. Great. Kristen saying all of the above, which is amazing. Great, all of the above. We're getting more answers on all of the above. Career switch. Okay, a lot of career switches also here. Okay, great. C and D seems to be the popular options. Great. No matter what your reason, I guess you are in the right place today. This session is designed to cater to all these motivations and guide you through an insightful learning experience. So, in the next 3 hours, this is what we're going to do. We'll start with an introduction to vibe coding, which is like a fresh approach that could transform the way we think about building with AI, right? Next, we'll explore something called the vibe framework, which can be your roadmap to becoming an active participant in AI development. And when we'll then move on to understanding what we are building together today, followed by the live build session where we will set up everything you need. After that, we'll take a 5 minute break. And then we'll continue on to part two of the build, where we will focus on the core product, which is the AI coach. And then we'll take a 5 minute break again and start part three, where we will work on customization. So, just to recap, we will do a setup in part one, take a 5 minute break, get back, do the core build in part two, and then take a 5 minute break again, and then work on customization. So, yeah, after that, finally, we'll wrap up with a deep dive into the Microsoft Generative AI Specialization program, which will be followed by a Q&A session where you can, where we will try to address any issues and doubts that you have. So, yes, get ready for an engaging hands-on experience that we're sure is going to equip you with the skills and mindset to build with AI. Great. With that, we'll start with the first segment where we're going to understand what vibe coding is all about. It has been such a buzzword on social media of late and even in the AI developer community. But do we really know what exactly it's all about? Tim, over to you for the explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people ask me what vibe coding is, and it can be kind of hard to explain at first because a lot of people just think that vibe coding means you're just sitting there vibing and typing whatever you want and creating programs. And there are apps where you can literally just sit down, open the app, start saying, I want to create this beautiful program. But the goal is to make the program functional and to make the program work. So there are a lot of tools where you can just start typing into a chat type module and produce a lot of code. But a lot of people don't know what to do with that code. So what we're going to focus on with vibe coding today is not that you don't need to know specific coding languages. We're going to use prompts as our code. So we're going to use questions. If you aren't familiar with the terminology prompt engineering or prompts, it's essentially how we ask the chat to give us our answers. In this case, a lot of us are used to using ChatGPT, Gemini to ask questions about all kinds of things. So this is going to be the same type of thing, but with code. So our produced output will be code as opposed to a conversational chatbot like we use ChatGPT and Gemini and things like that. So a big thing with vibe coding is that you can quickly mess up what you're working on if you don't have version control set up. You have to iterate on top of ideas in order to build them. So we're going to start very simply today, and then we're going to add dependencies, we're going to add files and build on top of it. So iteration on top of your first question. A lot of people might just say, I want an app that does this particular thing. For today, we're going to do an AI coach. And then they stop. They have a piece of code that was written. They try to put that somewhere and make it run, but they don't keep going. A lot of good vibe coding sessions, even a great AI personal coach like we're going to build today, would take probably hours to build the final product. And so vibe coding allows us to code while talking to a chat type module that produces code for us. So we don't have to spend years learning Python and years learning JavaScript and years learning CSS in order to build full backends and front ends. So we're going to chat, we're going to vibe with our chatbot, and we're going to bring a little bit more clarity to the word vibe here on the next slide. But it's not just about winging it. It's absolutely 100% about being able to code without completely knowing every code language that you need to know, but it still takes focused effort.
Perfect. I like the way you put it, Tim. Like we're gonna vibe with the chat box. That's, I think, a nice way to place it. Yes. So, if you were to, break down the steps of the old way of coding and the vibe way of coding, what would it be?
Absolutely. So I can speak directly to this because even when I taught courses similar to the Gen AI courses, just with Simplilearn, last year we started with a whole module on Python. So you had to get on board with understanding Python before you could even feel like you moved to the next step. So you had to learn at least Python, and that just gives you back-end logic. You still would then need front-end logic. And then you have to learn APIs. So you have to learn about the connections to OpenAI or or Gemini rather, in order to connect a chatbot to your workflow or a database to your workflow. You might have to learn more about machine learning and actual algorithms. So it would take much longer, at least 6 months to build a working tool. But now with vibe coding, we can literally have an idea, sit down and type out in chat format what our idea consists of with our IDE. Today, we're going to be using Cursor. And so we have these new tools where we can chat with it. And so we still have to give it some structured meaning and structured prompts so that we're not just completely going out in left field and building something that we don't know what to do with after we build it. But we don't have to spend months learning specific coding language. We don't have to learn a brand new coding language for another few months if we decide we all of a sudden want to build more front-end user interfaces. You can also ship things a lot faster because within your IDE, you not only can create code, but you can ask questions. What's the terminal command for this? How do I ship this? How would I connect this to Docker? So you can actually ask for guidance while you're asking for code output with these vibe coding tools that we're going to use. So yes, vibe coding, the trap here on this one, vibe coding without a framework, essentially you could just be producing random code that you don't know what to do with. It could be random code that potentially has a harmful effect if you do publish it to the world and they start using it, if you don't understand things like guardrails and creating a tool that's useful beyond just your test environment. We can only test a product so many times. Even if I put in 100 prompts, if I release it to the public and a million people start using it, it's going to behave in all different ways. So with vibe coding, we can quickly do evaluations, add guardrails, things like that, which we'll get into all of that today. But we don't have to spend months learning the foundations in order to actually bring our ideas to life.
Okay, thank you. Tim, before we move on to the next, I just wanted to quickly address a couple of questions, repeat questions that we are getting about recordings and certificate. Yes, there is a participation certificate that you will get for the workshop, but please do stay tuned till the end and submit your full name in the poll that we'll be launching at the end of the workshop. We will not be able to take manual entries or provide certificate for those who don't participate in the poll. And recording, yes, for all those who stay till the end of the session, we will be emailing the recording as well as the slide deck so that you can use it for reference and also try to build something else of your own at your convenience. Or if you want to refer something, you can use those as notes. So great. Okay, I will move on to the next segment, Tim, where we're gonna help all of our audiences walk away with an AI tool that they build in the next 3 hours. How amazing is that? I'm very excited. However, as promised, we should also give them the steps or rather the framework that they can repeat to build any AI tool in the future using vibe coding, right? So Tim, please take us through the vibe framework.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we're going to provide you with a vibe framework. So you don't walk away with the definition just being vibe with the chatbot. Like I said earlier, it's not wrong. We are going to be able to have a conversation with our chatbot in a more um, palatable way. But to give a substance to the word vibe here, we're going to assign some terminology to it. So for the V, we're going to say visualize. So the first thing you're going to have to do is actually think about what your project is going to be. It works. It might take more iteration if you sit down and just say, hey, I want to build an AI coach. But if you don't sit down and think about like, who's this AI coach for? What problems could arise from building this AI coach? Think of a little bit more. Even when I tell people about prompt engineering, you can't be vague. So with vibe coding, you also can't be vague. You need to actually think about what you're trying to build. Who's the user? Where do I want to put this when I'm done? Am I going to attach it to a website? Is it going to be an internal tool? So just visualize more of your project. And if you have trouble brainstorming, you can use something like ChatGPT or Gemini before you even sit down to do the vibe coding and say, hey, help me come up with a game plan. I'm about to start vibe coding a AI coach with Cursor. Explain to your ChatGPT tool or your Gemini what your setup is going to be and what you're trying to achieve if you need help brainstorming. But you need to visualize a little bit clearer than just, I want a one sentence, I want to build an AI coach. So doing a little bit more effort at the beginning before you even start really will help focus your goal once you sit down and start using the tools. Implementing prompts. So we're going to do that. Our first section is going to be very focused on setup. And then our second section is going to be about implementing prompts and prompt engineering as far as, yes, we can ask it to do something very simply, But if we give it a little bit more instruction, then it may produce a better answer. So I'm going to do a mixture today of, I'll just think of prompts off the top of my head. At some point, I hope to get some suggestions from the chat. And then if we need to make it a little bit more substantial, I also have a whole list of very structured prompts that we can then switch over to. So if we're getting chaos from our loose prompts that we're thinking off the top of our heads, I can just start showing you some more structured prompts that allow us to do things like structure our file structure within our program more specifically, or create our personas for the coach more specifically. So we will start with coaching roles, and then we will kind of prompt off the top of our head and do a combination of very specific prompts to get the outputs that we're looking for. The B for building logic. So that's where a lot of demos do die, like this say. So logic means conditional flow, state management. We're going to talk about memory. Today, we're not going to probably have time to build a full memory solution, but we're going to start working on state memory, where essentially if a user's using our tool, it at least remembers the last piece, the correct pieces of the last three things it says. And it's not always about just passing the entire chat history to the next pass through our tool, because that can create a lot of token usage. We'll talk about things like budgeting for tools and how these tools actually do cost money, even though today will cost very little if you do attach an OpenAI. But building that logic that actually helps more than just the visual wow, there has to be more substance to it behind the scenes. And then we will evaluate outputs at the end. So we'll create a whole evaluation Python file. And so that'll help us run some test cases that we might not think of off the top of our head. So then we can see, how would this behave if somebody leaves a section blank? Or how would this behave if someone said something that we wouldn't want them to use our chatbot for, if they started going into a territory that was seen as abusive or something like that. So we'll be evaluating outputs at the end. So it'll be a full session from creating the idea to evaluating the idea.
Perfect. That was very, very comprehensive, Tim. Thank you for that. Now, we're nearing the live build segment. So, Tim, can you share a detailed blueprint of what we're going to be building today? I think it's a very, very interesting idea. It was your idea, in fact. So we would love to hear more about where this inspiration came from, and how this product is going to be.
Absolutely. So we're going to build a personal AI coach. And the point is that you will be able to then ask your AI coach to help you do whatever you're trying to do, whether that's learn a specific topic within machine learning in 3 weeks, or if you want to learn how to code a full front end and back end. We're going to focus on back end today, but I'll show you a tiny bit of front end for people that want to keep going towards the end of the session. But you could then use your personal AI coach that we build today to help you iterate on vibe coding. So you can use your personal AI coach to help you use React to build front ends. You could use your personal AI coach. And the way we're going to build it is it's going to allow us to put in constraints. So maybe money's a constraint. There are a lot of cool tools, but the best tools that take away all the programming from us cost more money. So we're going to talk about things, and we'll be able to input into our AI coach, hey, I have a time limit, or hey, I have a budget limit. So, and it doesn't even have to be AI. If you want to start going to the gym, or or switch your career, the personal AI coach that we're going to build today is going to help in a very structured way, give you timeframes, first steps, realistic milestones, realistic risks, and ways to mitigate those risks. So I'm hoping that at the end of the day, that not only will we build the personal AI coach, but then you can use the personal AI coach to help further your interests in AI or building programs or anything else in your life. So I'm hoping that it not only brings additional context to people who want to take what they learn in this session and keep going, but also people that just want to know the basics and then build a personal AI coach for a different use or a different business domain. I personally, with the AI Handyman company that I created and run, I help small businesses achieve things that larger businesses can hire a whole AI team or a whole tech team. Smaller businesses and entrepreneurs by themselves can't always afford that. So what I what I highlight and do for them is help them integrate AI. So, what I want to do for you all today is help you integrate AI by showing you how to build a very basic model. And the model that we're going to build is going to help you then achieve whatever your next goal is by helping you brainstorm, map out real possibilities, risks, mitigations, and things like that.
Amazing. And how do you think this is going to be, different from other AI tools? Like, is it the tool itself or is it the process?
It's a little bit of both. So we're going to use Cursor. Cursor is an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. So a lot of people learn how to code in things like Google Colab, where Google Colab already contains Python and a lot of libraries. So you essentially just open it and start. So today we're going to use Cursor, which is a real live tool that people actually use for coding, and it has been enhanced for AI chat usage and vibe coding. So it builds off of VS Code. So I'm going to show a lot of tools that people might think are familiar from learning different topics, but we're actually going to try to connect those dots. We're also going to start really simple with just Python as a runtime and Streamlit as a basic UI. So I'm going to give you just a few dependencies so we can really highlight how Cursor can help you iterate and build a project quickly without introducing a ton of extra UI. We're not going to focus too much on front end today because that adds a lot of complications. So what I hope in this session and through my process that you'll learn the very basic way to set it up, and that most people that are watching the session will be able to follow along because I've reduced the steps to the bare minimum. So and then I think all the tools that we're using today, you can then expand upon that and literally build your wildest dream. But we're going to use some very common tools, OpenAI, Cursor, and Python, so that those are the building blocks of most, if not, I wouldn't say most, a lot of AI tools that we interact with each day. So you're going to understand the foundations of those three tools, hopefully a lot by the end of the day, and then have a clear path for how to expand on your ideas going forward. So we're going to give it a lot of logic. So you're going to see how we can build in logic without having to memorize all of this logic or code or anything, and then we're going to actually get an output that means something. So I'm going to show you some very common tools that people are using in the industry, but break it down very simply to start and then build from the basic building blocks. So I think that process is what's going to be a little bit different than most people experience in an education setting or a full-blown demo where someone's just trying to wow you with visual front end flair.
Amazing. Tim, we have a relevant question here that I found interesting. So
Yeah.
before we build, we go on to the live build segment, I think it'll be good to know if domain knowledge would be important before asking AI coach to build something for you.
So the way we're going to build it, and we're going to put in guardrails. So the tool we're going to build is supposed to be more of a discovery for ourselves. So you could, as far as domain knowledge, so let's say we're building an AI coach for fitness. It's going to help us answer questions about our own goals that we could then produce and provide to someone else to help them realize. So it's not going to be so much as an advice giving tool. If you were building a tool that was giving advice to your users on fitness, like strict do this, do this, do this in order to lose so many pounds or to fix this problem, then yes, that's where domain knowledge would come in. If you're building a banking tool, our tool that we're going to build today is more of a help our users and help ourselves brainstorm and come up with a realistic goal. So there is a fine line. You do want to make sure that if you're providing advice, especially if you get into like healthcare or legal, you'd want to be very careful with the tool that you're providing for other people to use if you don't have domain knowledge, because yes, we'll be using evaluations in order to see if our tool that we build is giving weird outputs, but if we don't understand that it's the wrong output, then the evaluation could kind of fall on deaf ears if we don't understand what we're evaluating. So today it shouldn't matter too much, but if you are building a complex tool for other people to use, and it's a law tool or a fitness tool, it would typically be good at some point in your building process to bring in someone with that domain knowledge if you don't possess it yourself. As far as coding and AI domain knowledge, the point of today's session is to give literally anybody at any walk in their AI journey at least a starting path for how to build these things. So you don't need domain knowledge in AI and machine learning specifically to follow along. You'll be able to maybe catch on to some concepts quicker if you know a little bit about programming and coding and GitHub and versioning and things like that. But I love to talk and sometimes I ramble, but hopefully that answers the question.
Mhm. No, yes, yes, Tim, thank you so much. Right, so here is a question for all our participants. We had shared a pre-webinar setup guide on email to all those who registered for the session. Can you please let us know how many of you have been able to follow it and finish the setup already? You can let us know in the chat if you can just drop a yes if you have done the setup already following the instructions. So we can plan the first part of the build accordingly.
I see a lot
Okay.
of no's already, and that's okay because I will go through the setup steps as
Yeah.
well. I do see some yeses.
Okay. Very few. Yes. Couple of you have done the setup. Okay, great. So we are now at the part one of the live build. We're going to take care of the setup in this segment. So those of you who've already done the setup, maybe you can just chill a bit. The important thing here is to ensure we don't spend too much time with the setup, though. So please try to follow along with Tim as closely and attentively as possible. We will not be able to wait too much if you are facing any technical or network issues at your end. But if you have any questions or issues that you're facing, please do drop them in the chat box and Tim will try to address it. But please note we have more than 300 participants here in the workshop, so it will be great if you're considerate of every other participant's build experience as well. So please don't keep spamming the chat box. My sincere request. Great. Okay, so Tim, before we start this setup, can you please take us through the different tools and resources we'll be using and why it's important to learn all these?
Absolutely. And so for the first section, for part one of the live demo here, I'm going to focus on setup and then we'll take a 5-minute break before we continue on. So if you're just a few minutes behind or a couple steps behind, know that we'll cover the setup and then take a small break. So hopefully that'll help people get caught up if they're lagging. So the one tool that we're going to use, and I can show this. Do you want me to show anything on the screen or run through the tools first and then go through actual screen shares of the tools? Because I can show them also how to set up an OpenAI API pretty quickly.
Yes, yes, sounds good.
Okay, so let me share my screen. So you're going to need 3 things before we actually start the vibe coding in Cursor. So let me get my screen shared. And once we get to the full live coding, I will more purposefully share a specific window. Today, I'm going to share my full screen, or just for this first part, so that you can see multiple windows here. All right, first thing you're going to need before we get started is Python. So Python can be downloaded for both Mac and Windows at python.org. Python is a runtime and a language. So we're going to use Python as our primary coding language today. Python handles the code logic for most of backend AI tools that we use. JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, that's where all the fun user interface comes into. I will give you some tools at the very end, but in order to keep it simple for as many people, you do need to download Python if you haven't already. And also, let me see if I can drop this GitHub repository in the chat. I don't know if there's a limit here. All right, so I also just dropped the GitHub repository in the chat. This GitHub repository actually has the files that we'll be working off of today, but what I want you to take away is just the README file. So if you follow the link in the chat to my GitHub, it's going to run you through the steps 1 through, I think there are maybe 7 full steps. but this will essentially tell you to install Python first. So that's the first thing you need. You need Python 3.1 or newer. If you don't know if you have Python, this GitHub is going to show you how to open your terminal. And I want to point out that I'm on a Mac, but I've included instructions for Windows as well. So if you have a Mac, follow option A for Mac to check if you already have Python downloaded. If you have Windows, you'll use this different code in your terminal in order to check if you already have Python. And if you don't have Python, you do just need to download it from python.org. It's a pretty lightweight file. It won't take up a lot of space on your computer if people are worried about space and things like that. So Python's already downloaded on mine, but if you click download Python, I see, can you show how to do it? Um, please zoom in on your screen. Oh, absolutely. And I will, like I said, I'll share my specific screens as opposed to my full desktop. I just will be clicking back and forth on some things here. So you will just click, so looking for Python for a different OS, if you have Windows, Linux, Mac, Android, other. So most of us on the call probably have Windows or Mac. So if you click this, it will start a download to your downloads folder, and then you will take that download from the downloads folder and install it. I have already done that part. So if I show you how to do, but you essentially just have to click the download. I can probably do at least one step. So this is going to put it in my downloads folder. If you're using Chrome, you can also see your downloads folder here. So then you would double click that and an install screen would come up. 3.14 is okay. Yes, as long as you have a Python version 3.1 or higher, you'll be good for today. So if you have Python 3.10 to Python 3.14, you should be good to go today. So that's the first thing you can get started. It's a pretty small file, so it shouldn't take too long. I'm going to flip back to my GitHub because you guys can follow the GitHub instructions pretty to the letter and get to exactly where you need to go. I do want to highlight here that if you're using a Windows and downloading Python, again, I'm on Mac, but from what I've reviewed and practiced before the demo today, Windows installers will need to, on the first screen, if it comes up with an option that says add python.exe to path, you will need to check that button. Mac users don't quite have the same setup behind the scenes that requires that one step, but that should come up during your installation. Oh, yep, absolutely. I can drop this GitHub link in the chat again. So Python, get that downloading. The next thing you're going to need is Cursor. So if you don't have Cursor downloaded, Cursor is an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. So that allows us to actually type the code, use the chatbot within Cursor, use the terminal commands to pop up our front end. And it's just a full environment, whereas something like Google Colab is an education environment where you can type code, see the output of your code, but it kind of stops before you need to get to deployment and next steps. So Cursor is a much more full option. Cursor is built on top of VS Code if anyone's used VS Code, but Cursor has a stronger AI. Yeah, I see in the chat. Yes, Cursor is an alternative to VS Code. It's essentially built on top of VS Code, so it's going to look very similar. But Cursor has essentially VS Code. You can use AI functions with extensions, and there's a chatbot on the side. Cursor is built from the ground up to be used with AI. So just the purpose is a little different. I will also say that Cursor does have paid versions, but I've run this twice before. We started the session today, so you can get through everything we're going to do today on the free tier of Cursor. That's also why we're keeping it simple, just Python, just Streamlit, so that people don't start hitting limits halfway through the demo and have to upgrade their Cursor. If I hit a limit halfway through the session on Cursor, I will quickly just upgrade so that I can keep the flow going. But most of you should be able to get through the whole session today with the free tier of Cursor. So again, cursor.com, you would just click the download button here and again, choose your Mac or your Windows system. So those two things you'll need to download. Once you actually get it download, you can open Cursor, but we'll get to that part next. There's one more thing you need before we actually start the coding. So today we're going to be using OpenAI. So we're going to be connecting to, if people have a subscription to ChatGPT, that's great, but that's a different thing. So this is an actual API or application program interface that will allow us to invoke and send calls to. We're going to use GPT-4o Mini today because it's budget friendly. Most of us, if we are subscribing to ChatGPT, are using ChatGPT 5 or newer versions. But essentially, the OpenAI API allows us to send calls to ChatGPT models and receive the output in our app that we're going to build. So you don't have to have a subscription, but if you do want to connect to an actual large language model, then you will need an OpenAI API. You can absolutely follow along if you want to skip this step. But I will say that in my demos, I ran this twice yesterday and I spent less than 2 cents. So there is a little bit of a commitment because by setting up a API with ChatGPT or OpenAI rather, you do have to add billing information because calling a large language model and getting responses isn't free in this case, but this is a very good API to have. I use ChatGPT a lot as far as API connections because I can quickly connect it to chatbots or websites or AI features. So if you have one API in your pocket, OpenAI for ChatGPT calling is a good API to have. Oh, I see someone that says I use Cursor a lot and I have exhausted my free tier. So you can still follow along. You can upgrade if you want to. You absolutely do not. Can we use what we have if we do not? If we do have a subscription? Absolutely. So if you already have a subscription to Cursor, it will work. I just didn't want to make people spend money to follow along. So we'll start basic, but then at the end, especially when I give you tips and tricks to move it on to a more full project with a full front end back end that's going to use a lot of Cursor credits, having a subscription will benefit you after the session. But I've made sure to keep this session today light enough that people with the free tier who haven't already exhausted their credits will be able to follow along for free. And you'll still be able to follow along with the build. So with the GitHub repository, in the GitHub repository that I've given you guys, I not only copied the README, there actually is a full file for the app, the evaluation, and the prompts. So if people know how to clone a repository, oh, no offense, yes. Let me see. Let me see if I can fix that too, so that I'm not blocking. You do not offend me by asking. If I am blocking the screen with my face, I can come back later when it makes sense. Give me just a second here. Yes, and that'll make it bigger too. So I can come back in a minute. As far as tools, we'll get to that. So I'm starting very basic. So wait, that we're only going to be calling Streamlit and OpenAI as far as packages, but we can get to that as well. All right, so let me just show you the OpenAI workflow for those of you who do want to follow along in this way as well. So you access the OpenAI API platform through a slightly different entry point, and I'll drop it in the chat here. So you're going to go to platform.openai.com. And so again, I'll repeat this step. You can skip. You can still build the app in Cursor. It's just when you type something into the app that we build, it's not going to give you a response unless it's connected to a large language model, but you'll still be able to see how it behaves for me. You'll still be able to see how to create a project. But if you want to create an actual API for OpenAI, it will probably come in useful for you in the future. And I can also give you some hints about usage tracking and budgeting and things like that as we go, which typically people have found helpful in the past. So platform.openai will take you to a screen similar to this. We're going to pop down here on the side to API keys. And we're going to create a new secret key. So if you're creating platform.openai.com for the very first time, you will need to, let me see if I can find it for you guys real quick. So you will need to add some billing information. So if you go to your settings within the platform.openai.com, I have mine set up so that essentially it keeps $10 in there. It slowly drains it. Once it comes down, I think to $5, it says right here on the screen, it tanks it back up to $10. I don't pay a lot. I typically do this just for demos. If I was doing this for an actual client, then I handle that in a different way. So I would say in the last probably 4 or 5 months, I've used about $2.50. So it's not expensive, but it does require you to set up billing information so that you can invoke the ChatGPT model within your app and use the actual large language model to get responses. Again, you can skip this if you want to, but I want to show people that want to fully connect it from end to end. Sorry, let me get some questions in the chat. All right, so is this also a link for those with subscription? So if you have a ChatGPT subscription, that is separate. That's great. I have a ChatGPT subscription too, but this is the actual API for OpenAI, where we'll be calling a ChatGPT model. We'll be using GPT-4o Mini in our app. So you actually need an API if you want to follow this part from end to end. You'll still be able to create an app, but it won't reach out to OpenAI with your information and bring you an answer back unless you connect to it. And you can't connect to a ChatGPT subscription like that. Yes, so if you already have an API key, I will also say that if you're working, some people in their workplace work in Azure or AWS Bedrock or Google Vertex. That's another place where your employer or your team can provide you with API tools. So this would be essentially the workflow if you are a solo demo or a solo developer or a small business, and so you don't already have a shared working environment. So that's me. I know how to work in some of those large enterprise systems, but this is essentially, I'm focusing on a solo builder. So we would need to go get our own API. Oh, yep. We'll use that in Cursor here in just a few minutes. So the last thing I'm going to do here is just show you when you actually create an API key. So you'll create a new secret key. You can name it whatever you want, as far as we can name it coding demo. So I'm going to create a secret key here. Permissions all is fine on here. Now I do want to highlight that you have to copy the key here and put it somewhere safe. We're going to put it in Cursor here in a few minutes. But once you click done here, you will not be able to copy paste this key again. API keys are like passwords. You don't want to share them. You don't want to upload them to GitHub repos. So here, when you create this API key, this is what we're going to plug into our program to say, here is my link to my ChatGPT or my OpenAI API rather. It will connect to my billing information. It will cost me the tokens essentially. Again, we're going to keep our token usage low today, but what I want to impress upon you here is that you have one chance to copy the full key. Once you click done, and you can just click copy, you can save it in a note or you can drop it. We're going to put it in Cursor. But essentially you need to copy that when you first create it, because once you click done, it will show up here as a secret key, but you won't be able to copy that whole key again. Don't worry if you've already gone past the point of no return. All you have to do is delete it. You can revoke the key and you can create a new one. It's also not a great idea to share your keys on screen share. So for example, when we're done today, even though I didn't show you the full key, I'll delete my keys from today as well. But again, just to repeat that, once you've gotten to this point, I'm over here on API keys. How do you buy keys? So you don't have to buy the key per se. So you create an account with platform.openai.com. So I do log into platform.openai.com with the same username and password that I log into ChatGPT, where I'm actually doing conversational chat with ChatGPT. So it's my same username and login, but you have to log into platform.openai and set up billing information before you can use an API. So once you set up your billing information in the settings, and here, let me see if I can make this bigger. Once you set up billing information in the settings, up to you if you want to do that today, but for those who want to follow along from end to end, you go back to your dashboard and API keys, and you just create a new secret key. So you don't have to buy each key. You sign up on the platform or log into the platform.openai.com, and then you enter your billing information. Again, I've probably used about $2 in the last few months, so it's not anything that's crazy expensive. And you create that key. All right. So again, I'm just going to highlight if you need further steps, if you go to my chat, or I'm sorry, if you go to my GitHub screen, and I'll share that one more time in the chat. And I'm spending extra time here because I want people to get set up once we get to the full cursor part where we're starting to actually vibe code and prompt. We'll move a little bit faster, I promise. So again, that GitHub link that I just dropped in the chat walks you through every single step that I just said. So if you need help installing Python, that's step 1. If you need help downloading Cursor and creating a project folder, that's step 2. Step 3, we're actually going to generate our project folders. So that's where we will go next. But I went through this README a couple times myself. I followed it from scratch, and it should get you where you're going if you follow it line by line. And I promise again, once we get to cursor and just cursor, I will stop sharing my whole screen and just share the window so that it'll become bigger. All right, last thing, if you see on the GitHub, you need to create a folder. So you can create a folder named Personal AI Coach, and we're going to open that folder in Cursor. And once we do that, most everything we do for the rest of the session will be inside Cursor. Yeah, I see a question in the chat. I'm struggling with setting up Python. What step are you? Because as far as setting up Python, you should just have to go to python.org, download the installer file, install it onto your computer. If you have Windows, you just make sure that you check the add path checkbox during the installation. Here, let me see if I can do this too. So I just realized that I am giving some hand movements and things like that too, but I don't want to block the screen. So we'll save. All right. And another question in the chat, did you say the free trial will be enough? The free trial for Cursor will be enough to get through. The OpenAI API key, if you want to follow that part, does require you to sign into OpenAI platform.openai.com. I'll copy paste it one more time in the chat. It's not a subscription. You actually have to set up billing information, because when we build our application in Cursor, we're going to send information to GPT-4o Mini, essentially like we were chatting with ChatGPT, but in our own app. So that's how we connect to large language models outside of ChatGPT. So when we create an app, even with GPT-4o Mini, we're not sending information to ChatGPT. That's the interface where we subscribe and we have chats with. We send information to OpenAI. We invoke a specific GPT model, and we use it to get a response back within our app. So that does require an API key, which does require billing information, but I think you can load as little as $5 or $10. And today we'll only use a few cents. Oh, all right. So last thing here, if you're following the GitHub information, so hopefully you've downloaded Cursor, you've downloaded Python, and you are choosing whether or not you want to create an OpenAI API key. The last thing you're going to want to do before we open Cursor and start our work there is create a folder named Personal AI Coach. So we all have different file structures that we like to keep, but I literally mean go into your desktop files and create a file called Personal AI Coach. So I personally have a lot of files, but I'm keeping mine in Simplilearn webinars. Wherever it makes sense to you, I've created a personal AI coach that I'm going to leave there. That's something I've already built on GitHub for those of you after we're done with this session, I'll push everything we do to GitHub. So I just created a second one called Personal AI Coach V2. You can name it whatever you want, but know that you're going to have to find it in a minute when we open Cursor. So you're literally just going to create an empty folder that makes sense for your file structure, and we're going to find it in Cursor, just an empty folder. Perfect. How do you open file and create the project in Cursor? So that is the next step. So I will go to the next step here, and then I will take different questions. And let me switch my screen sharing around here so that I'm just sharing this specific window. That should make things larger. And I will be mindful of how I look with it in the background. All right, so let me know in the chat if I'm blocking major things in Cursor. So I see a couple questions here. How is Cursor handling creation of files as mentioned in GitHub link without connecting to OpenAI models? Because Cursor has its own models that it's connected to. But when we create an app, we would be creating an app that then we control and we connect to. So I'll show you in practice. I think I can answer that question better when I show you. So if people haven't opened Cursor, sorry, I did not see where to add the OpenAI key. Oh, not a problem. So OpenAI key, we haven't actually added it to our Cursor yet. So far we just downloaded Python, downloaded Cursor, and created an OpenAI key. So now we're shifting over to Cursor, and I'm going to give you the basic setups here. Then I'll answer questions, and we'll take a 5-minute break and help people get caught back up. So GitHub, the only reason I've used GitHub is to provide you with the README file. So if you're familiar with GitHub, you don't need to clone the repository to follow along. You just follow the steps in the README. There are the files. I've set up a small demo in GitHub if people want to clone it later. But if you're familiar with GitHub, right now, it's just a place where the README file can sit and live so that people can refer to it later or refer to it during the session. You'll get where you need to go if you follow the instructions in the GitHub README. You don't actually have to clone the repository and follow it that way. But as we go through the day today, I can help you if you have more questions about GitHub, because GitHub is a good place for version control. So while we're building today, what I've done when I was preparing for this demo is essentially I got through a few steps and then I pushed the version to GitHub so that if I then messed it up, I could always go back to the version that was working. But we'll talk about version control. That won't be a focus of. Yeah, so with Cursor, I haven't done anything yet except just open it. So I'm opening Cursor here. This should be the screen that everybody sees when they open Cursor. You can see up here, it says upgrade to Pro. That's because I currently have the free tier of Cursor. So we're going to start in Cursor by opening a project. And so we're going to find that file that we just created on our desktop. So again, your own personal preference. I have a large file system that makes sense in my head. That's why I encouraged you to create a file that made sense in your head. And all we're going to do is open that blank file. So now I'll have Cursor open. I have this empty file over here, Personal AI Coach, and a new chat. So this new chat right here in Cursor is what's going to help us chat and build the code. That you do not have to have an OpenAI API key. But through the chat on Cursor, we're going to build an app, a personal AI coach. And then when we want to use our personal AI coach, that's where the OpenAI key comes in. So that if you wanted to publish this to a website or use it as an internal tool, you have to connect to a large language model to make your tool work. While we're building it in Cursor, Cursor is going to give us chat functions that allow us to interact with large language models that help us produce the code. So that's how you can follow along without creating the OpenAI API key. The OpenAI API key is to make our app that we're building work after we're done building it. The actual building we're doing in Cursor, and that's where the free tier and the subscription tier of Cursor comes in. You should be able to be fine with the free tier in Cursor, but if you've already used Cursor a lot, you may have hit your free tier limits. There's a monthly limit as far as how many chat completions and code completions it can make. But if you're new to Cursor and just downloading and opening it for the first time, you should be good on the free tier for the whole session today. Good. I see in the chat, one step behind, you have your folder open in Cursor. That sounds perfect. That's exactly where I am. All right, so now that we're in Cursor, we don't have to do much here. I will refer back to the GitHub really quick because that'll help us get our file structure set up, and then we'll take that break. So give me 1 second. So coming back to GitHub, and I'll try to keep making things bigger. So now that we've downloaded Cursor and opened it, we created a file named Personal AI Coach. Mine is just Personal AI Coach V2 so that I don't mess up the Personal AI Coach that I built before the demo. We've opened the folder in Cursor. So the next things we're going to do is we're going to add our first prompt to Cursor. So we're going to create a file structure. And so vibe coding, we're absolutely going to come up with prompts off the top of our head, but to make sure everybody gets started in the same place, I've created a pretty simple prompt, and I'll drop this in the chat. And this is going to help everybody get to the same setup as far as your file structure and your base file structure for our Cursor app that we're building. So let me drop this in the chat, and I'll drop it in Cursor. Oh, I'm in front of the screen again. Okay. Completely in front of the screen. And this makes the screen, let me see, does this answer? Personal AI Coach V2 is not a Python file. It's just a folder that I created on my desktop. We haven't created any Python folders yet. Does this work? Can you see me and my screen? 1 or 2, yes, perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, so, and again, I'll make things bigger in a second, but here is our first prompt that we're going to put into Cursor. Let me drop this in the chat. Absolutely, I can post the GitHub. So this prompt, and let me give you the GitHub one more time. Here's the GitHub link for anybody who needs the full instructions. And again, on the GitHub link, you can just follow the README instructions. You do not have to clone the repository. So the first prompt that we're going to put into Cursor is kind of long, but I want it to be very specific. So we're going to ask it to create a minimal Streamlit project in this folder with these files. We're going to create an app.py file. So that's our first Python file, a prompts.py file. So that's our second Python file, an evaluation.py file, our third file, and a requirements.txt file, a README, and a getignore. So if you look at my files that I shared in the GitHub, that's what I have so far. So I have a getignore, a README, an app, an evaluation, a prompts, and a requirement. That was as simple as I could make the file structure to keep everybody on board and achieve our tasks today. A real project, and especially if you added a front end with React and Node and Next.js, would blow up immediately, and we'd have sometimes hundreds of files. So I'm very specifically trying to keep this locked into 6 files. And as we go on, I'll explain to you what these 6 files do. So I'm going to pop back over to my Cursor, and I'm actually going to drop that exact prompt. Oh, not my GitHub link. I'm going to drop this exact prompt into Cursor, and hopefully this is where people will start seeing the magic. Give me just a second. And vibe coding is about chatting with the chatbot, and we will do plenty of that. But this, I want to be very specific so that we all get to a very similar space. All right. So it's planning next steps. It is getting our project set up. And let me see if we have, oh, you're not able to copy the prompt. Kristen, do you have your GitHub? Because I just had the same problem. If you copy it from GitHub, you can copy paste it. You can even just hit this button. But yes, I was not able to copy it from the chat either. I just tried to do that. Try, instead of actually highlighting it and copy pasting it, you might be able to hit the three dots next to the prompt in the chat and hit copy. Let me see if that works on my end, because I did just experience a very similar thing. Yes, so if you're trying to copy from the chat, it didn't work for me either, but if you hit the three dots next to the chat, it should say copy or delete. All right, we're still thinking here. Normally it doesn't take this long. Let me see. Still thinking. And we all might experience a little bit of, oh, perfect. Simplilearn, from Simplilearn webinar in the chat too, they also added the prompt to another link on a Google Doc if you need it there. Thank you so much for doing that. Still can't use cursor because it looks different from yours. Does So I was very careful. Kristen, in the chat, while this is loading, have you used Cursor ever before, or did you just download it today? Okay, that's interesting because I tried not to use Cursor for anything else before this session so that mine would look very similar. If you're on a Windows, it might look a little bit different, but it should look similar. If you're missing certain things at the very top bar here, you might need to just toggle. Let me try to make this bit. Well, this is going to be hard to make bigger, but in the very top corner, you might need to toggle the primary sidebar and the AI sidebar. So if you just have one blank white screen, if you toggle all these panels, we'll be using each of them. So if you have one giant white screen, if you try toggling the primary sidebar, that'll give you your file structure. Toggle panel will give you your terminal, and toggle AI pane will give you your AI. Is it the same as GitHub Copilot? It's very similar. So a lot of these tools that are essentially AI chatbots within an IDE function similarly. So yes, it's very similar to GitHub Copilot. It does a very similar thing. It's not even necessarily better. They all serve different purposes. I would say that Cursor is built for AI at its core, whereas if you're using GitHub Copilot in VS Code, it's probably an extension. That doesn't mean it's less powerful. It just means a lot of things work similarly in a group setting on Cursor, whereas if we all had VS Code and different extensions like Codex with ChatGPT or with OpenAI and GitHub Copilot, they would all pop out slightly different things. So when I'm trying to lead a larger group through the same exercise, Cursor is good because it functions similarly for all of us without us having um, different chatbot logic driving our code creation, if that makes sense. How do you swap left and right panels? Let's see. I don't want to do agent because I did not have to do that. So I do want to point out that we got our file structures. So we have app, eval, and prompts. I'll answer a few more questions and we'll see if we can swap some things, and we'll take that 5-minute break to help people get caught up before we start coding the full project. Because there are a couple more steps as far as before we can start seeing outputs. But one thing you can use in your chat, because we have a chatbot right here in our IDE, you can ask it questions. So let's try and see if it works. How would a user switch the AI panel and the file structure panel in Cursor if they want it to flip sides? Oh, thank you. Simplilearn has a Google Doc with the prompt. The prompt is also in, the first prompt is in the GitHub. All right, so verify sidebar movement. I want to make sure, confirm search cursor IDE move, verifying sidebar. So I'm going to do one simple thing as far as I don't want to mess up our flow here. So what I'm going to do is pop up good old handy ChatGPT. So not to confuse anybody, this is actual ChatGPT. I'm just going to ask it see if we can troubleshoot this question real quick. In Cursor, the IDE, how does a user flip the AI chat panel and the file extension panel on their main screen? If we can't get an immediate answer, we won't spend too much time on that. But I do suggest, and if you don't want to, because sometimes chatting with your chatbot in Cursor can then affect the code that you're building. So if I have questions about file structure or a question about a coding question that I don't want to necessarily get incorporated into my project, I often step over to the side and talk to my handy chat GPT or LLM of choice. So in Cursor IDE, the chat panel in the File Explorer can be flipped by moving the primary sidebar or secondary sidebar to the opposite side of the window. So go to View in the top menu and select Appearance. So here, if you go to View and Appearance, you should be able to flip some things that way. So I won't spend too much time on that, but for the person that asked that question, hopefully you can apparently make it Zen mode. You can do all kinds of fun things. So that should help you get it set up in a way that's visually pleasing to you. Perfect. Thank you. So before we take that break, let me just do a couple more things. So I'm going to cancel this because I don't want it to think that I'm asking it to move anything in our app that we're building. So far, all we've done is the one prompt that gave us a great file structure. It gave us our getignore, our app.py, which is a Python file, our evaluation Python file, our prompt Python file, our README, which is going to be very similar to the README that I posted on GitHub because this is how I did it. But my README on GitHub, I actually ran through the steps a couple times. I enhanced it. I added windows and back instructions. But from a very basic level, we just created a file structure with one prompt. So that's the key magic that I want you to see. This one app file, this app Python file is already 115 lines of code. And we didn't have to learn how to use Python. We didn't have to learn how to code 115 lines of code. So essentially, we just skipped a major step. And that major step would be learning Python coding language for months. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to keep all. So we can essentially see the changes to our code before we say, okay, actually make that part of our code. But since it's just set up a basic file structure, I'm just going to keep all pieces. And again, I'm going to highlight, so our requirement.txt file, when we get to installing that, only has Streamlit and OpenAI. So a lot of projects are going to have anywhere from 10 to possibly 20 or more file dependencies. The purpose that I'm doing this today, our actual user interface might look a little underwhelming, but we're only using Python coding language and we're only using two additional packages. So that's what I'm hoping will get everybody to a good starting place, because we're keeping it so slim. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. Let me see if I can do it quickly this way. That might be a little too large. Does this work? Is this better without being overwhelming? I can bump it up again if I don't want people to miss things, but I also, let me see, I can reformat it on my screen a little bit too. All right. So I'm going to highlight the GitHub again. So we've followed step 3. We've set up our first prompt in Cursor, and it's given us our file structure. So the next thing we're going to do is create and activate a virtual environment. The reason we're going to do that is because we've installed Python on our, perfect, looks good. We've installed Python on our computer. So we're going to create this app together. But then if you create another app that doesn't need Streamlit or OpenAI, you don't want to download all of the packages globally to your computer. So by opening a virtual environment, and we're going to do this right in Cursor, essentially that will say, hey, I'm only working in this project, the personal AI coach. I'm going to download a couple packages and they're only for this project. So you don't always need a virtual environment, but when you're installing a lot of different Python packages, so if you guys created a personal AI coach tomorrow and it needed a whole different set of packages and tools, then it won't interfere with what we build today if they're both in their own virtual environment. So don't get too lost in the wording but that's why we're going to follow this next step. And so in order to create and activate, this first line is to create the virtual environment. The second line is to activate. If you have Windows, we're going to do this right in Cursor. So I'm going to copy paste this. And so I'm going to come right over here to my terminal. If you haven't opened your terminal yet, you can toggle it with this toggle. So we have our file structure on the left, our terminal on the bottom, and our AI assistant on the right. And this is what makes an IDE an IDE. It's an integrated development environment. We can see our code. We have a terminal, so we don't have to go all over our computer to type things into the terminal, check our file structure. That's why it's integrated, because we can see all these pieces together. Your cursor is not opening. I'm not sure why your cursor isn't opening. If you just downloaded Cursor, you may, depending on your computer and your setup, you may have success if you restart your computer once you finish the install and then try to open it again. All right, so right here in my terminal, didn't have to do anything yet other than open this terminal. Oops. So here's my app. It doesn't matter which page we're on though. So we are going to just copy paste exactly what was in GitHub. I'm going to see a little pop up here in the corner that said, we noticed a new environment has been created. Do you want to select it for this workspace folder? I'm just going to say yes. And then you'll see that in front of my Timothy Drew at Timothy's MacBook Air Personal AI Coach V2, now you can see in parentheses a little .vnv. So that's my confirmation that I've entered my virtual environment. So that allows me to know that the next thing I do is going to only exist within my virtual environment for Personal AI Coach. Without a virtual environment, you're not necessarily ruining anything, but you might be downloading packages that you don't need for other projects. So it's kind of we're keeping our files tidy as we build. So the next step after you've created a virtual environment, and I know I keep saying we'll take a break, we'll actually take that break in just a minute, but I want to give you one more here before we get to the OpenAI API key. So step 4, if you're following along on GitHub, pip install requirements. So let me show you 2 things. Pip install, pip actually stands for, I think, pip install packages. It's a recursive acronym. So pip is actually just, some people call it Python install packages, but last time I checked, I think it's actually pip stands for pip install packages. So essentially we're telling this with this command to install the requirements. And if you remember, I quickly showed you our requirements txt file. We're only asking for Streamlit and OpenAI. So if we were doing a much more robust project with React and Node and Next.js, we'd have a lot more requirements. And that's where things start to break down in a live coding environment, because all of our computers are going to handle different things differently. So by only downloading 2 packages, I'm hoping that more people get through this doorway to get to the next step. But we don't have to. We could also say pip install Streamlit, pip install OpenAI, but instead of pip installing each individual package, we're just going to pip install requirements. That way, when you actually scale to a project that has a lot of requirements, then you don't have to install every single thing. You just install the requirements file, and that gives you the packages that you need. So we're going to pip install our requirements. We're inside our virtual environment, so we're only installing Streamlit and OpenAI in our virtual environment for this. Getting an error that Python was not found. So did you download Python and then go to the download and actually install it? Because you have to download Python and then click on the download in your downloads folder and install it. So like on a Mac, oh, you have Python taking the class. Um, are you using Python in something like Anaconda or in a education environment? Already had Python installed. So Google Colab comes with Python installed in it. So when you go to Google Colab, you don't have to install Python because it's already there. It lives inside Google Colab along with a bunch of other packages like scikit-learn and matplotlib and pandas and numpy. You did install it though. So one thing you can do, so give me just a second. So on my Mac, I'll pull open my terminal. So Windows or Mac, you can look in your terminal and either one. And if you type in, I know this is the Mac, you can see what version you have. So like I typed Python 3 dash dash version. I just in my normal terminal, I'm not in Cursor. This is just my terminal on my computer. And it says Python 3.1, 3.7. You can, let's see, we can probably check that in Cursor too. Yep, it works in Cursor too. So even though I'm in my virtual environment, so I would say type and let's double check because the Windows command is probably slightly different. So if you have Windows, you don't have to type the 3. So if you have Windows, if you type in Python space dash dash version, and you can do it right here in Cursor, it'll tell you if you have Python. I am. So I'm running my installs within Cursor. Yes. Well, so I installed, let me rephrase that answer to that question. Python is installed from python.org onto my computer. Cursor is installed from cursor.com onto my computer. I'm installing just the Streamlit and the OpenAI packages within Cursor. I did not install Python is installed on my actual computer. Let me see. Let me ask. We're going to jump over to Handy Chat GPT. If users are installing Python for the very first time and we're using Cursor, do they need to link Python to their Cursor account before they can run Python scripts, or will it work automatically? All right, let me see. Can be get the steps file of how to perform. All right, so according to my quick check with ChatGPT, users do not need to link Python to their Cursor account if Python is installed on the system and available on the system path. So that's important for Windows. Again, I have a MacBook, so that's a little bit of a blind spot for me. But when you download Python and you do the install, from what I researched, there should be a box that says add path. So that might be one thing that's tripping people up. Let's see if what's the quickest. Oh, sorry. I don't want codecs. Just hit the wrong key on my keyboard. Let me blow this up a little too. What is the quickest way for people to resolve the path issue when using Python in Cursor on a Windows computer? Ah, thank you. I was just about to ask. So someone said, done with all the steps. That was easy. Full app up and running. Perfect. So person that said done with all the steps, are you using Windows or Mac? Mac. Okay. I mean, yes, me too. So that makes sense. Okay, but here on my ChatGPT, so I'm asking just what the quickest fix for is with people to resolve the path issue when using Python in Cursor. So essentially it's saying to rerun the Python installer and make sure that you enable the add Python to path, PATH, all in caps. That's the fastest, least confusing method. So if you cannot find Python in your if Cursor says that it does not exist, you have to make it, that has to happen or it won't work. So the quickest suggestion from ChatGPT for my Windows users is to rerun the Python installer and enable that add Python to path. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Someone else said I'm using Windows, had Python already installed as well. When you first started using Python on your Windows computer, did you have to kind of struggle with this path issue? Because again, I'm not a Windows user, so when I was literally talking to ChatGPT a couple days ago about what issues might my Windows users have that I won't be aware of, and so it was highlighting that path issue. Oh, okay, good. All right. I also encourage people to, if you have ChatGPT or Gemini on the side, you can also, so yes, please keep asking me questions, but you might be able to get some more nuanced or more specific for you answers once you actually start a conversation. You can say what, you can even give screenshots to ChatGPT and say, hey, this is what my terminal's saying. This is what screen I'm stuck on. But you did have to have that checked. Yeah, absolutely. You have to go through settings. Absolutely. Yes. Let's take a 5 minute break. So let's take a 5 minute break now. We'll come right back and we'll continue with setup here, answer questions, but we'll only do setup for a little bit. We got to start building this app all the way out too. Yep, I'm gonna disappear off camera for 5 minutes. We'll come back. I'm Eastern Standard Time. I know we're all over the world, so we'll be back in about five after 10 or whatever time it is. So closer to 6.5 minutes. And to create the virtual environment, that is on the GitHub as well. So the virtual environment for Mac users, it is this. I'll drop it in the chat. And for Windows, it's this. And I'll drop the GitHub link one more time. All right, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. So those of you still needing help with setup, we got to move on to building, but I encourage you, if you are stuck, go back to the README file in the GitHub, follow the instructions to the letter, and if you have to start over, that's unfortunate, but sometimes the setup can be the most difficult part, and especially getting a group of 250 plus 283 people on the exact same page is very difficult, but we are going to keep on moving. Let me get over the shoulder here. All right, just a slight recap. So we created our virtual environment. So we're going to move on to the next steps here. So after we created our virtual environment, we installed the dependencies. I'm keeping it very light on purpose. So our only two dependencies were OpenAI and Streamlit. Streamlit is going to give us a basic user interface so that we can see our tool in action, and the OpenAI is going to link to the actual OpenAI model. So that's where our OpenAI API key comes in. So if we come back to GitHub, we just keep going. One of the last steps we need to do is configure our OpenAI key. So this is a very temporary way to add a key. So a way to make your key more permanent would be to create a .env file. And I can post that when I push the repo at the end of the session. I'll make sure I have instructions to do that. And again, to explain that while I'm doing that, so I'm going to copy paste that exact command and I'll drop it in the chat as well. So if people have created an OpenAI key, you can create an OpenAI key, but if you did not connect your billing information, your key won't work. Because essentially OpenAI isn't going to let you use the model for free. You have to pay. So it has to essentially say, okay, this person has billing information. So you have to typically at least add, like, I think minimum is either $5 or $10, which you absolutely do not have to keep following. But so we're going to export our OpenAI key, but you need to replace the sk dash your API key here with your actual API key. So before you run this command in your terminal, and I am going to grab my key from off screen here. I promise I will bring my screen back in 5 seconds. So when you created a key in OpenAI, this is where you're going to paste that key. And I will be deleting this key as soon as we're done. There are ways to hide it, but for time's sake, we're just going to keep moving. So I exported my OpenAI key with my actual key. The next step I have to do is run the Streamlit app. And I promise I'll come to questions in just a second. And so now I have a very basic personal AI coach. And so this is coming from almost singularly our APP folder, our app Python folder, because we are very purposefully creating one Python file with all the logic. So that's our app file. The prompt is where we're going to build personas for our coach, and evaluation is where we're going to build evaluation tools in order to evaluate our program that we're creating. But this, and if you wanted a much prettier outcome, that's where you have to dive into front end plus back end, and that's where React, Next.js, Node.js comes in. But that instantly blows up your file structure into a lot more files, a lot more dependencies. You start using JavaScript, Tailwind CSS, TypeScript. So in order to keep it as simple as possible. Oh, absolutely. You can change and update the OpenAI key later. As far as your OpenAI key, I oftentimes when I'm teaching, I have to accidentally share it. Don't ever share your API keys. It's essentially because you had to link it to your billing information for it to work. So if you share it, someone could take it and use it for their own project, et cetera, et cetera. We're only going to be using a few cents, but absolutely. I just copy pasted my API key on a recording. So in theory, someone might go in, pause the recording, take my API key. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you don't want to paste your API keys. So absolutely, if I was building this and I had accidentally shared my API key, I would just go back to platform.openai.api and revoke it and create a new one for my project. Yeah, absolutely. So this opened in my browser once I just ran Streamlit run app.py. So I'll drop that. It's in the GitHub file, but I will also drop it in the chat. So once I ran Streamlit run API, and if you want to stop this, you can hit it's Control C on a MacBook. So I'll run it again. So when I type the command Streamlit run app.py for my Python app, it automatically flips to a web browser. And that's what Streamlit is for. So Streamlit is built to give us a very basic user interface so that we can actually see our app in real life, as opposed to just seeing the code behind it all. Yeah, so it can also run in your terminal. If it's just running in your terminal, you should be able to actually follow the link if you go to localhost here. So like for me, I hit command and then click it. On a Windows, it might be slightly different. So if it doesn't open automatically, try to try to click on the local URL in the terminal output. But yes, Cursor does have, depending on how your setup is, it might pop up an additional screen that shows you that user interface. But the purpose of this and the purpose of Streamlit is to see what it looks like before you have a front end team or yourself building a whole front end. And yes, so I see someone else that said the front end is a little different than mine. That makes sense because we're all using Cursor to prompt it to code. So it might give us slightly different code snippets here and there. Boilerplate code is what people call code that it's kind of just like the standard way to do things. So for the most part, Cursor is just giving us boilerplate code when we ask for things. We haven't tried to get real creative or create actual intellectual property. This is very much Cursor is saying, here, I took your request in the chat and I handed you code that matches that request. And it's often just the most basic way to do it at first. Yes, so you can put your chat API key into Cursor. I'm not sure if it's asking, I don't know if the OpenAI platform's asking you to revoke it or not. But here, so let's actually give it a goal. So before we start modifying it, we can actually use this personal AI coach. So what is our main goal? Let's say our main goal is to build a working AI app for my company that helps people reduce time spent sorting through emails. Now this isn't necessarily the same thing as a prompt. I'm filling in this form to see what kind of output I get, and we'll be more specific with this here. So what is our current situation? That's an interesting way. So I am an AI educator trying to help teams upskill. Any constraints or preferences? Difference in technical abilities across the team members. So Cursor has gotten us this far, but now if I actually click coaching advice, that's where it's going to send the information I've typed in this form to OpenAI, and that's where my OpenAI API comes in. So you can get to this without an OpenAI API, but once you actually want to invoke a model and ask a question, that's where the OpenAI API key comes in. So I'm going to click coaching advice. It's running a little thinking wheel. So here we got some coaching advice. Coach response, summary of the situation. We want to create an AI app for our company to officially sort emails. It's going to ask me some clarifying questions. Now this is mostly just a brainstorming exercise. As we continue to build, we can add more. We're going to add personas, we're going to add guardrails, we're going to add additional things. But here, just a quick thing to see that it's working. I typed in my main goal, I typed in my current situation, I typed in any constraints or preferences, and it's giving me a very basic response or very basic plan. Now, essentially, why wouldn't someone just go to ChatGPT to do this? Well, they could, but the purpose is if we're building a personal AI coach, we're going to enhance it with more logic to give that coach personas. We're going to enhance it with guardrails because a lot of AI tools that we interact with are just different companies or different groups tailoring ChatGPT or tailoring Gemini to do a specific task, do a specific task more efficiently. So that's what we're doing. We're essentially writing a program that then calls OpenAI ChatGPT 4.0 Mini, GPT 4.0 Mini, in order to help our users use GPT in a very specific way. So we're still leaning on the brains of OpenAI's GPT models, but we're creating a program that tells it how to behave, tells it how to be a coach, tells it how to be careful, or how to make sure people are being thorough with their responses. So we're building logic that helps people use GPT 4.0 Mini in a specific way, in this way for a personal AI coach. How can we input API in the course? So I actually added my input, or I added my API with this export OpenAI. So I'm not going to share the exact key, because that's linked to my billing information. Let me go back to my GitHub. But this is how you would actually pull it. So I have Mac instructions and Windows. Now, if you close cursor and come back later, this is very temporary, ethereal. It's not going to stick around. So you would need to you can add a .env file, and then you would put your API key in there so that your program would know. So if we have time at the end, I can try to expand upon this. But again, I'm trying to focus on the very basic ways that we can make this work. So the most people on the call can make it work together. All right, so I'm going to come back to cursor because yes, we now have a personal AI coach. Also here, it did give us some basic personas. So we have a supportive coach, a direct coach, a reflective coach. So we can design that differently as we want to. Right here, we have temperature. If people haven't heard of temperature before, when we're building AI tools, there are a lot of hyperparameters. Temperature is a very common one. So temperature is essentially a scale from 0 to 1. A 1 would give the model permission or instruction to be more creative, whereas a 0 would say essentially stick to the facts. Don't be creative. Don't be making things up outside the realm of what people consider usual. So for an AI coach, we might want to be a little bit more realistic. So we might want to set our temperature to 2 or 3. And then we could rerun it. And I encourage you to do this while you're practicing and while you're looking at it. And take your temperature all the way to 0 and see what kind of coaching advice you get. Take it all the way to 1 and see what kind of coaching advice you get. But typically the temperature, it represents a scale 0 to 1. 1 is more creative, 0 is more stick to the facts, don't make up too many extra pieces of information. That's a very basic way to explain it. It does get more complex than that, but from a very high level, temperature kind of scales the creativity of the tool, whereas a 1 would be maybe used for more creative writing projects. Lower temperatures are typically used for chatbots that are answering questions or creating plans because it's more realistic, sticking to the facts. And question in the chat, when it comes to adding guardrails for coach response, can we make it dynamic? And second question, can it be dynamic input from our end for OpenAI to respond only in a peculiar way? Oh, absolutely. So as we continue, you can make your coach very specifically exactly what you want it to. So I'll give you some tips and we'll go through some specific ways that we're going to steer it. But absolutely, I encourage you, now that you have this user interface and you can see how your code's actually affecting it in real time, absolutely add guardrails that say, I only want you to answer questions. I've made chatbots before that essentially it was like if the user asks a question that doesn't pertain to this product, then kind of shut down the conversation because you don't want to, let's say if you had a Bath and Body Works chatbot, you don't want people to come to your chatbot and ask questions about how to become an AI engineer because then they're just wasting tokens on that free application of an AI chatbot. So yes, like if you have a very specific product or company chatbot, you would add guardrails that kept people from using it for other reasons, essentially. All right, so that takes us, we have our UI now. So what we're going to do next is add some specific features. So we can do a few things. First, let's beef up our personas. So we're going to start, and now here's where we're really finally starting to vibe. So we can chat with this chatbot now right here we can say, great. I love to say great and thank you to my chatbots because it is actually, even people that curse at their chatbots, you are in some way giving it positive and negative reinforcement. And reinforcement learning is all about penalties and rewards. So you don't have to curse out your chatbot, but I like to say thank you or that's what I was looking for, as opposed to, I also would tell it that's not what I was looking for to help steer the conversation in the right way. So I'm going to say great, thank you. That's perfect base program. Now I'd like to enhance the personas. I'm going to also keep telling the model I do not want to add additional files. I'm trying to keep this project lightweight and easy to follow. Let's enhance our coach personas in the prompts.py file. And I will copy paste that prompt right into the chat. I mean, I encourage you to start chatting with your cursor chatbot yourself, but if the local URL is not opening in your browser, I would maybe encourage you to, I mean, you could, if you use ChatGPT or Gemini, you could drop a screenshot into ChatGPT or Gemini because it's hard for me to get a full view of your screen when there's 250 plus people. You could also just so like to close down my Streamlit app, I do Control C and that stops it. So you could, for a first starter, just try to close it and run the Streamlit command again. And again, that command is just Streamlit space run space app.py. All right, so let's see what it's given us here. So I asked it to, let's enhance our personas. I don't want to add additional files. So essentially it's saying I'll read prompts.py to see the current personas, then expand them with richer, well-documented persona options and update the prompt templates to use the extra information. So here it's telling me what it does. I can physically go see what it did. If I click on my prompts.py file, I know you can't copy from chat. Let's see if the Simplilearn host was helping with the Google Doc, but also if you look in your chat, there's 3 dots next to the prompt. And so like if I click on it and click copy, it does let me copy. But if I just highlight it with my mouse and copy paste it, it doesn't work. But if you click the 3 little dots next to the piece of the chat that you want to copy, it should come up. Oh, you only have delete. We'll see if our Simplilearn host can add this great thank you right here to the Google Doc. I can be I have a lot of prompts that I pre-prepared just in case chaos ensued and we needed to clean it up. So at the end of this, I'll push new information to the GitHub repository. So everything there now is focused on getting the project set up. After the session's done, I'll push what we worked on to the repo as well so that you can see, and I'll create a prompts file so I can copy paste those prompts. But I also suggest that while we're absolutely, you're welcome. I also suggest that while we're doing it, you can take versions of what I say. So you don't necessarily have to word for word type great thank you, but let's all together enhance the persona. So practice your prompt engineering by trying to describe that you want to enhance the personas. You don't have to use the same terminology as I do either. You can say it in more human language or different language, not necessarily more human language, but you can say something like, I want to make my coach have different personalities. You don't have to call it a persona. I specifically have been doing this for a while, so I know some keywords that might get me where I'm going faster, but the tools are built so that it can understand human language and help you get where you're going the way you would normally describe it. So you don't have to worry about using technical language. Being more thorough in your prompt is more important than using technical language. So if you describe exactly what you're trying to make happen, even without technical language, you'll get there most of the time, if that helps at all. So here in our prompts.py, I can see exactly what it's changing. So just from my prompt, it's gonna add general coaching goals, help the user clarify and refine their goals, ask thoughtful context-aware questions, persona-specific guidance. It's gonna have core style, priority focus, what to emphasize, what to avoid. I'm just gonna go ahead and keep all of this stuff, but that would be up to you as the developer, as the vibe coder. You can keep parts of it and not keep other parts of it. I'm just going to keep it all. And we can always pop back over to our UI here. So nothing crazy happened over here. We still have supportive coach, direct coach. Let me make sure, because sometimes you do, if you stop and restart your Streamlit app. Okay, nothing crazy changed, and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure because we will start changing the way this looks as we go. I also have a ton of screens open. I'm going to close some of these out. All right, so I'd like to add more personality settings for my coach on the actual app UI. The prompt that you missed to get the additional input fields on the main screen of the personal AI coach. So no, you didn't miss anything. Our very first prompt up here, I've hit my usage limit. So you don't have to do this, but give me 5 seconds. I thought this might happen. I've run through this demo so many times that I had a feeling I might. So give me just a minute to get my account updated so we can keep rolling. I made it through this demo 2 or 3 times before I hit my limit, but I thought that might happen. So give me just a second. Thank you. And in the chat from the Simplilearn webinar host, they have added that additional information with the prompts. And I apologize. This should only take a second. I just have to type in a verification code. And I am just signing up for the very basic $20 a month. You guys shouldn't have to do that today. But we want to keep things flowing. All right. Sorry for that slight hiccup. All right, let's get back here. So I want to add more personality settings for my coach on the actual UI, on the actual app UI. So, and if you see, I mean, it's making sense to us from a development perspective here. In our last prompt, I just asked it to increase the personas, and I specifically said to work in the prompts folder. So the prompts.py is where we're storing the information about our personas. The app is where our actual visual cues are coming from. So now that we've enhanced the personas, I want it to actually show up as additional options for the users. Nope. I wish that would go away. All right, so we'll give it a second to think. All right, again, this is only so far suggesting 2 main changes. Oh, now we're up to 8 main changes. Absolutely fine. I'm going to let it finish thinking so you can see thought briefly, no linter errors. Summary of what changed. So it gives me a summary of what it added. New personality controls in the sidebar. I'm just going to go ahead and keep this code. Typically, if I was building, I would look into what it was changing a little bit more. Again, you don't have to understand what every piece of code is doing, but the more you stare at it and look at it, the more you're going to understand like, wait, no, I definitely don't want it to change that section. I like that section. I wanted it to change that. So it's oftentimes just a high level check. But now when we go back to our personal AI coach, I'm going to refresh the page and you'll see now that we automatically have more settings over here on the side. Try to make this a little bigger. So now we have more settings over the side. So before we just had supportive, direct, reflective coach. Now we can give it a response length. We can ask for short, medium, long. We can control its tone, more casual, balanced, more formal, challenge level, gentle, push harder. If we want our goals to be, if we want it to be more motivational and less agreeable, we still have our temperature here, but we've just added some basic personality settings that we as the user, when we go to use the app, can actually check. All right, so let's keep going. Let's be so we're enhancing the persona. And again, to explain what we're doing, so yes, anyone could go to ChatGPT and ask for ChatGPT, if you have subscribed to ChatGPT, you could say, hey, I need you to act as a personal AI coach. And it would give you decent outputs most of the time. But here we're actually building a tool that always behaves like an AI coach. So you don't have to rely on the user to start their conversation with, hey, I need an AI coach. It's already set up to be an AI coach. You're giving them very specific tools where they can toggle, they can choose what kind of coach they want. And we've just started to we've just broken the ice on personalization. We can personalize this to the moon, essentially. But now we are giving someone a very specific way to interact with a GPT model or a large language model. It doesn't always have to be OpenAI. I will say that I use OpenAI for a lot of things because it is such a good general use tool, but we are creating an app that tailors the way that people ask GPT a question. So we're not relying on them to know anything about prompt engineering or know anything about giving it additional context. We're building an app that collects additional context from the user, forces them to choose a coach persona and what tone and how long they want their responses to be. And that information is then passed to OpenAI so that ChatGPT or the GPT-4o mini model gives us a very specific response. So this takes the prompt engineering out of the hands of your user. You're giving them a tool that interacts back and forth with models like OpenAI or other large language models in a very, very, very specific way. And that's what a lot of AI tools are. We're not, every company doesn't go build its own large language model. They connect to large language models that are already very large and useful. And then they create apps like this that give it very specific functionality. You can build on eternally, and eventually you would add more memory. So if you want to have users that come back and forth to your site, you can add memory, and you can start doing that on Cursor. You can add databases to inject your own information about your business or your company. So yes, apps like this are connecting to tools like large language models and then guiding the users' questions and guiding the responses back to the users in very, very specific ways with the coding logic that we're building. How is it different from Google Gemini? As far as OpenAI, I mean, they function very similarly. Google Gemini actually has a lot of guardrails built into it for enterprise use cases. So if you're building education tools or tools for your workplace, Gemini is already going to maybe handle things a little bit differently. So it might be less likely to give answers that the media, a lot of people have posted things, hey, my chat GPT said this. And it's oftentimes things like OpenAI. It's rarely things like Gemini because Gemini has guardrails that keep weird or strange outputs from coming in as like a default. So sometimes OpenAI can be more creative. Gemini can be more safe for enterprise settings. That's a very high level way to describe it. But all these large language models are trained on specific data points. So when you connect an app to one of them, you want to specifically connect to one that works well with Google Workspace. That would be Gemini. If you're creating an app to work with Word documents, you might want to use Copilot. If you're using something for social media trends, you might want to use Grok. So just different models for different sources, but they all work in this app connection way in a similar way. Gemini Gems are also a type of personal AI coach guiding you through the prompt. Oh, gotcha. I appreciate that. All right, so we've added some additional controls over here. We've enhanced our personas. And again, we don't have to get too deep into the code. We absolutely have control of the code. We could change anything we wanted to in the code here. So that's where it's different than using, there are other tools like Lovable. Lovable is a great tool where you can build a whole website and you don't have to look at the code. You just do a visual editor and a chatbot and it builds websites for you. But you can look at the code, but you don't interact with it in the same way. So this is a good approach to start learning how actual code turns into a program without having to pay quite as much money. Yes, I just had to upgrade to Pro, but that's only because I've been playing with it for this demo for a couple days. All right, so let's add some additional behavior here. I have, just in case, I'm going to pop up. I have some suggested prompts. These are crazy long, so don't worry about these. I just want to make sure that we cover goals that are working for people. All right, so let's add some lightweight memory to our session here. So we're just going to go back to talking mode with our chatbot here. I'd like to add some lightweight memory. Notice I'm not saying, I was about to type session state memory, which essentially means when people are using the tool, it remembers the last couple things they said. But I'm trying to use more language that everyone might not be familiar with. So I'd like to add some lightweight memory. You can just say you'd like to add some memory. Let's try that actually. I'd like to add some memory to this tool so that as the user is building their coaching plan, the model and the app we're building remembers key things about the interaction. And I'll copy paste this in the chat. I know that you can't necessarily copy paste, but that'll allow Simplilearn to add it to our web host to add it to the Google Doc. But I also encourage you to just type something similar into yours. So we're going to say, I'd like to add some memory to this tool so that as the user is building their coaching plan, the model and app that we're building remembers key things about the interaction. And one thing that people often do, and so there's a way, there are a lot of different ways to create memory within a chatbot. So if you go to a tool like Bath and Body Works, I said earlier, you might be talking with that. That's just a typical, any retailer might have a chatbot like that. And they want to make it smart enough so that if you ask a question and then you ask a follow-up question, it remembers, it doesn't start a brand new response. But then there are more enterprise versions where the memory is much more persistent, where let's say you're a user to a website. Every time you log into that website, there might be specific information about you and your profile that gets passed to the chatbot so that it remembers who you are. You wouldn't have to reintroduce yourself. So there is anything from lightweight memory, where it just passes a couple key pieces of information from the last thing you said to the next thing you ask, so that it sounds more like a conversational chat back and forth. Today, we're not going to build long-term super persistent memory. We're just going to work on making sure that as a user has a conversation with our tool here, it doesn't pretend it's a new person every time it generates a new response. Memory is not a setting per se. So if you think about an AI pipeline, the input is the beginning. So the input is where a user asks your application a question, and the output is where the user gets a response from your application. And in the middle of that AI pipeline, there are things like databases and memory and prompt injections. So memory is more of a piece of the puzzle if you're building an AI pipeline. So input goes into the pipeline, output comes out of the pipeline, and in the middle, you decide how robust to create your app. If you need persistent memory, there are a lot of different memory settings. So no, memory isn't really a setting. It's more of a one piece of the puzzle. All right, so let's see what this did for us. I'm guessing it's going to be in our app. Yep. So I have 10 changes here. I can see that right off the bat. Nothing in other files, so that's fine. But let's just read a summary of what it did for us. So we asked it to add some memory to this tool. Summary of what was added: memory and conversation. So it added conversation history. Each time the user clicks get coaching advice, that turn, which is the user message plus the coach reply, is stored in a session state, and then it's passed in the next one. So that is a way that you could quickly create something that people call context bloat or input overload. So essentially, if you pass everything you did in your last turn, so everything you asked and everything the computer or the AI model gave you as a response, if you pass all of that in your next question, it's going to be a large input. You might hit input limits. So we'll start here and then we'll try to scale it down a little bit so that we're getting specific pieces of information that make the chat more useful. So session memory here, a short summary of each turn is stored in ST session state session memory. And you'll see that we are gaining a few additional files up here, but that's okay for now. We still have our base, just 3 that we're starting with. Full context for the API. So every new request is sent to the API, which is our OpenAI API. And it's essentially showing it. So it's going to be the system prompt plus the memory. So our system prompt would be in this case. So once I click accept and accept those changes, essentially if I fill this out and click get coaching advice, let's just go ahead and fill it out with test, test, test. And it's actually sending test, test, test to OpenAI right now. So it seems like you're experimenting with your input. If you have a specific goal or situation you'd like to explore, feel free to share more details. That's great. So now it's actually keeping a list of our conversations so far. So we added another feature. So now it's saying it wasn't very helpful because I just said test, but now we've added another layer where it can keep track of our conversation so far. So now when I type in an actual goal, my goal is going to be teach 250 people how to vibe code an AI app live. Current situation, virtual only, multiple OS on different computers. Any restraints or preferences? I'm going to say constraints, time limit. That's our biggest constraint. So now we're going to run our app again. We're going to get some coaching advice. Oh, can you say again which AI is more directed, tailored towards which particular use cases? Oh, absolutely. I'll show you. As far as what files did it add, so now I'll show you that in 5 seconds. So now you can see on our actual user interface, we have conversations so far. So our original goal was just a test. Our new goal is teaching. So now you can see that our conversation is building on top of each other. Do I necessarily need to see the output every time? Sometimes you don't need to see the memory. In this case, since we're just building from scratch, we can see what we did before. But a lot of tools just keep the memory behind the scenes so that next time you ask a question, it doesn't start the conversation all over. But you can see in real time that our user interface is opening or expanding. And so when I was saying it added a file, I think it's actually just adding some caches. It didn't add a main file. So I didn't mean to throw you off there. Once I asked for additional memory solutions, this cache came up, but it's not a tool. I didn't want anybody to start coding in a different space. I was trying to keep it very minimal to those files, but I don't think you have to worry about that. So if a new file didn't pop up on your screen, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, and what I was saying about different AI tools, and we'll continue to build this out a little bit. Also, so I'll talk about tools in, does anybody in the chat want to give me a suggestion? So type in a prompt for me or type in what you want to change next. Let's focus on making this tool more useful. It can be any question. If 700 or 700, there aren't 700 people here, but if 25 people put something in, I'm just going to pick the first one. So the first one asked me a question, how would you like to enhance this user interface next? Let's think about just different ways to make it more useful, whether it is more structured output or it can't be color or theme yet. And we'll get to that towards the end. Okay, so let's see what we can accomplish with that. So in the chat, I got RAG, and I also got change the generated code with Hungarian notation. Oh, wow. Let me try that in a minute. I don't want to reformat too many of my things, but do you mean like you actually want oh, yeah, like translated. That's a good one. Let's say, can you add a translation feature where the user can choose what language the output is generated in? Highlight Hungarian, Spanish, and Italian, please. So we'll see what that pops up. Also in the chat, I see RAG. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So we can we'll play with that in just a second and see if we can do that. So retrieval augmented generation is another, I have to refer to my pipeline again. So if you have retrieval augmented generation, instead of just asking ChatGPT or Gemini a question, you have input, the user asks a question or a prompt, it starts to move through the pipeline. But in that pipeline, you have a database of your personal information or your company information. So when a user asks a question, it's able to access a stored database in order to inject additional context into your prompt before it goes to ChatGPT or before it goes to OpenAI or Gemini. And that way, so you have to store that information somewhere. Oftentimes you have to embed your information. So that might be a little complex for this, but we'll see if we can come up with a lightweight way to do that. So I'm just going to keep this. Again, I do want to say it's a tiny bit reckless of me to just keep every single change, but at the same time, we're vibing. We're just trying to build quickly. So, all right. So I'm just refreshing it here. Let's see. I'm going to say teach 500 people to live code. Virtual. I'm not giving it much information, but we need enough limited time. Get coaching advice. So I'm hoping once this populates, it'll give us some language tools at the bottom. And it didn't, but that's fine because not everything works the first time. So let's see what it said. So output language, oh, in the sidebar. I didn't even look over there. So now we have output language English. So I could have changed it. Let's change it to Hungarian and run it again. That was actually a really good idea because you can make tools useful for a much wider audience immediately by offering the output in different languages. Well, there we go. So now we have our coaching advice in a different language. And then we could switch it again and add another one. So a good use case for RAG. I hate to keep saying Bath and Body Works. I don't know where that came from. I don't work for Bath and Body Works. But let's say so, like if you have a chatbot for Bath and Body Works, a perfect RAG system, so retrieval augmented generation, would be essentially like Bath and Body Works would use OpenAI or Gemini, and then they would create a database with information about their candles and their scents and their soaps, or any store could do that. Essentially, a database full of information about their personal inventory or their services or their products. So when somebody asks a question, it retrieves additional information about that company's specific information and then injects it into the AI pipeline. When it goes to OpenAI or Gemini, then OpenAI and Gemini, which are pre-trained, you have to give it the additional information. So that's a way of forcing your own personal company information or your own domain or education or whatever. It's a way of injecting additional information into the regular flow of that AI app or chatbot. Yes, so temperature would make a difference. So I can't read Hungarian, but let's do a much more simple one. That's a great question since that was one of the first things we added. I'm going to just refresh this, which is getting rid of the memory, but that's okay. I'm just trying to keep it not to, from getting too cluttered here. So let's say my main goal, let me come up with a better goal because I have a few saved. So let's say our goal is to transition careers. So my new main goal is to transition into data or AI role in 90 days while working full time. So now my constraints are going to be 10 hours a week. All I have, no paid courses, must build a portfolio. I get overwhelmed if the plan is vague. I'm going to say actually limited because in AI, there are so many tools. Like with Cursor, I just did have to sign up for Cursor. So it might be, you can limit budget. It's hard to eliminate budget, whether it's for tools or course information. Limited budget. So my current situation, that would be a perfect time to say I work in healthcare. I'm going to say that because that was my previous life. So I'm going to get coaching advice, and right now it's on 7. So next we'll get coaching advice and turn it all the way down to 0, and we'll see if we can notice anything specifically changing. So here, very first line, that sounds like an exciting transition. Let's create a structured plan. So even that sounds like an exciting transition with an exclamation point could be something from the temperature being higher, because sometimes you don't want your chatbot to be exuberant all the time. But let's see here. It looks pretty. Dedicate 6 hours, breaking into manageable daily sessions, choose a project that interests you. I mean, that works pretty well. Join online communities. Now let's just run it again at a temperature of 0. And good. I was going to say, I hope I don't have to retype it, and I don't. Also, I mean, you would probably want to continue to build this out. So maybe once I get a response, maybe then it asks a few questions to help me refine it. So it's not just asking me the same questions over and over and over. So a more useful chatbot for me, and we can do that as a next step, would be to then have it ask me 3 more questions. Or maybe if it's asking me clarification questions, actually populate those as fields that I, as the user, can fill in. So let's see, did it give me a new one? Let's see if it's exactly the same. So let's see, that might have been the first one. That sounds like an exciting transition. Yeah, that was one of the first things I thought would go away. So here's our second version here. So it starts out with absolutely, let's refine the plan to ensure it's clear and actionable for you. So it's still core skills focus on Python, SQL, basic machine learning concepts, healthcare data, leverage your background. It's a little just right off the bat, I can see it's just more straight to the point. It's not as wordy. It's not using exclamation points. It's not telling me it's an exciting transition. And that's because I turned the temperature down to 0. So essentially, it's going to try to get right to the facts. It's using more hard bullet points where it's just breaking things down in a much more tabular, more contextual way as opposed to being wordy and expressive. Some predictive text in the input box? Absolutely. So it came from Cursor. So exactly what you said. So if I, and that's a great thing to point out. So I'm going to refresh my app here. Come on, refresh. So right here, this EG, get a promotion in the next 12 months, our code actually did that. But since we're using Cursor, we didn't ask for that specifically, but we can change that. So if we wanted to change the example text for our main goal, we can go to Cursor and say, will you change the example text in the goal section to give more examples? You could make it very specific. So if you wanted people to use your tool to ask very specific questions, then you could say very specifically, format it like this. But for the most part, it's just to help people understand what your tool's for. So here you can say now that we ask Cursor to do that, now it says instead of just get a promotion in 12 months, switch to a new career, run a marathon. And that's just placeholder text, so we can type right over it. But you can absolutely, you can guide the conversation for the user of your tool by changing that to literally anything. So Cursor just popped that in as a suggestion when we first built the project, but we can absolutely enhance it or change it. Using your Google Drive as a database. So that's an interesting question. There are a lot of different ways to use a database. It's not that you can't, but it would require a lot more connections to pull information from your Google Drive. So there are certain things like Supabase is one that I use. And it's essentially a service that has vector searching involved as part of the service. Because when you get into complex, our AI chatbots work so well because we can give it a general idea and then it uses vector math to find similarity searches in the data. And so your Google Drive might not be, you essentially need to turn your information into mathematical representations of your information so that it can be searched better. If it's a small table, you can use a normal Postgres table or even a Google Drive table. But that's almost taking it back to like old Google searches that were just keyword searches. In order to take full advantage of where we've gotten today with like vector databases and vector math and similarity searches that make these AI tools quick and powerful, you have to turn your information into, you have to embed your information into vector representations of words. So essentially, it's a mathematical representation of a word or a picture if you're working with image generation. So Google Drive isn't unusable, but there are other tools that will get you where you're going faster. Like Supabase is one that I've used frequently. All right. Well, we only have a half hour left. Let me see. In the consensus, we were going to take another 5 minute break, but we could just maybe let's take a 2 minute break and then we'll come back and we'll focus on questions and wrapping up, answer as much as we can. Because essentially you can do anything with this, but I just need a really quick break to take a drink of water and stop talking for a second. But I know we're getting close to the end. So let's just break for like 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll come back. Yes. You can create a knowledge base. Supabase is one of those tools where you can create a knowledge. There's a lot of different ways to create a knowledge base. And kind of the industry right now is working on what's the best way to create a knowledge base that accurately holds my information and then allows the best and most efficient retrieval of that information. All right, real quick, just a 2-minute break. I will be right back. All right. And I'm sorry I didn't give you guys I didn't time out the second break well. Sometimes I just get talking and you guys are asking great questions. So I just kept going. Let me get my screen shared back up here. So to answer the questions in the chat, yes. So when I'm done today, it'll take me just probably maybe a half hour once we're done, but I'll clean up what I've done just slightly and then I'll push it to the GitHub repo as a final file. So I'll probably create a secondary repo, but I'll link it to the first repo. So the link you have for the first GitHub repo, I'll link it to a secondary and we'll call it a final so that the original setup GitHub stays usable for everybody. Because I worked hard to make sure that would be, when I say easy to follow, I know that that is a complicated thing to say. It's not easy for everyone, but it's got a lot of instructions. And if you follow them to the letter, you'll get pretty close to where we were going. But to answer questions in the chat, can you create a knowledge base and attach? Absolutely. So I saw someone in the chat earlier mention a previous webinar on LangChain. LangChain is a Python library that is for that. With LangChain, you can link knowledge databases. You can create full RAG pipelines with LangChain. You don't have to use LangChain, but LangChain is a very, again, I say user friendly in a careful way because if you've never used it, it doesn't feel user friendly. But LangChain exists in order to help you create AI pipelines that link knowledge bases and create like RAG pipelines, inject additional prompts, prompt templates. If you want people to ask things in a certain way, essentially you let them type in your chatbot and then you convert it with LangChain into the way you want it to be passed to the large language model. You can do the same thing with outputs. You can check your outputs and make sure there's no harmful information and spit out a response that's been cleaned up. LangChain is a great tool that works right in Python files. It works outside of Python files too, but it's built for Python as a library. And its specific purpose is to create these more complex AI chains. So again, I'm avoiding complexity on purpose so that more people can make a working app during this session today. But LangChain is a perfect tool for how you would start connecting databases and knowledge bases and retrieval functions and formulating specific prompts and even the persona here. So we're adding personas to our personal AI coach in a very basic way. Again, you could enhance that to the moon and back with things like LangChain and creating much more specific prompt handling and things like that. And that's again all on the back end. So your user doesn't see that. Right now, we're giving our users a lot of options just because I wanted you to see how the actual user interface it changes in real time. But a lot of the times, all of that instruction is hidden behind the scenes within your programming so that the tool just works the way you want it to work without you having to rely on that person specifically typing a very specific prompt or something like that. And also, oh, okay, good. I'm still over the shoulder. Would it be feasible to add connectivity to, say, a server or dynamic database or SQL? Also, how would distinguish between, say, a generic response versus a specific tailored response, say to a ticket number or for yes. So one thing we didn't have time to get to in much detail today is if you can format your prompts and your responses in a structured format like JSON. So essentially you can enhance memory capabilities that way. So what we've built here as far as like memory. So essentially it's just giving us once we type something once, it gives us a response. And then when we type it again, we can see our last response. But we could very specifically instruct our workflow here through the coding logic to take very specific pieces of the user's main goal or current situation, and we could structure it in a million different ways. So if you wanted something like the ticket number, then we could create programming logic that would pull the ticket number. So like if we made personal AI coach wouldn't need a ticket number, but I get what you're asking. So if we made a field for ticket number, then we could use coding logic to make sure that ticket number is captured, saved, and then repeated in the response exactly like we want it formatted. And because we're vibe coding, so we could even start, I don't want to convolute too much of what we're doing, but can you help me create efficiencies in this tool by allowing structured memory, storing, and responses into JSON format? For example, I'm trying to think of an example that would be like a ticket number coach. For example, could we start listing the date and time that each coaching plan was created and make it a more structured part of the generated output? And I will copy paste that. Drop it in the chat. All right, AI answers to the input. Every single word needs to be precise to make AI understand what you want. So is there any benchmark to evaluate the output or mistyped text or wrong input evaluator? There are probably multiple libraries for that. But to that question, we actually have an evaluations.py, so let's focus on that. And then we can build on the answer to your question there. So right now we're implementing structured JSON memory, time-stamped coaching plans, and instructing the model to return JSON so that we can parse it and store it. If you were doing something with like say ticket numbers, then you could follow a similar workflow to make sure that tickets were captured and stored in a very particular way and repeated back in a very particular way. I'm going to use time and date stamp because it seems like it applies to a coaching plan. And then let's cover the evaluation one, and I'll attempt to answer that question with an example. So again, it's still doing a little bit of thinking. Still thinking. Thought briefly, thinking a lot briefly, planning next moves. Well, and I just saw it say that loop was wrong. So it's doing some of its own debugging while it's going, which is very helpful. Because a lot of the times you just have to run before vibe coding, you would run your program and then you'd have to debug your program. And now it's literally building code and checking the code and debugging the code before it even tells us to go ahead and try it again. So it saves a lot of time, but it does kind of take the code out of your own hands. So like this Python file now, I think when we started it was 120 lines of code. We're up to about 364 lines of code. So we are very quickly, oh, you don't see my screen. Let me make sure my screen is sharing. Are other people seeing my screen? Or is everybody not be able to see my screen? Okay. All right, so it finally finished. That was 16 changes. I'm going to go ahead and keep it. We will go ahead and run it real quick just to see if our timestamps came through. Let's do one. Here's a fitness habit. What's my main goal? My main goal is going to be to lose 12 pounds in 10 weeks in a sustainable way. My constraints are going to be I can train 4 days a week. Current role, I sit at a desk virtually teaching a lot of the time. So what I'm looking for here is the timestamp. All right. So here, again, very basic example of it, but now we have a coaching plan. So that is it's going to enhance its memory capabilities in the background. We also are just dipping our toe into formatting structured responses. So now we've added a timestamp. If you were trying to create something that held on to ticket numbers, you could follow a same pathway so that you'd have ticket numbers. Now, I didn't type in the timer date, but it knows the timer date based on my actual sharing. And my AirPods are starting to die. Let's make sure we're still good. Okay. All right. So now we have timestamps. You could repeat that if you wanted to in different ways, but you can see that our format instantly did change a little bit there. All right, now let's evaluate. Let's do some quick evaluations here. We've only got about 15 minutes left, but these are great questions. Thank you guys so much. All right, so our evaluation PY, what is this for? So at the very top, now again, Cursor just built this for us. I didn't give it much instruction here, but essentially it's a simple evaluation script for the coaching prompt. So this script is going to run 3 illustrative test cases against the prompt templates. It'll call the OpenAI API and print a short report. So let's see what it does beforehand. I'm actually going to close out my Streamlit app so I can get back to my terminal command bar. And if you don't know how to run the evaluation.py, you can absolutely ask our chatbot here. Can you give me the terminal command to run the evaluation.py file, please? Perfect. So I don't have to remember every single thing. So I'm using Python 3. I'm going to just copy this over to my terminal and run this. So my evaluation, essentially we would need to, because we can sit here and play with our tool, but we're not essentially testing it for every edge case. We're not testing it for every single thing that could go wrong. People might ask it weird questions. People might not ask all the information that it needs. So in order to keep it from limiting us to what we can think of as a test, we create things like evaluation scripts. So this script, let me try to make my terminal a little bit bigger. I can even expand it. Oh, that's a little too big. All right, but here essentially it's running 3 prompt-based test cases against the OpenAI API. So test 1 is career growth. So it's choosing a persona of supportive. Here's a summary. Let's quickly use cursor and more vibe coding to make this a little bit more useful. So let me grab a prompt that I already had stored. So we want to build an adversarial test suite. So we want to know more about, and since we're running out of time, I am going to copy paste. This is a large prompt. I did not just pop this off the top of my head. But essentially, we want to add a lightweight adversarial test. So we're going to create 20 adversarial test cases that are going to cover vague goals, contradictory constraints. So if someone says they have no time, but they also have 2 hours a day, how is the model going to interpret that? Unrealistic timelines, such as like if someone says they want to launch a full product in 3 days that the computer knows isn't possible. Sensitive-ish topics, so no medical, no legal advice. So I will copy this into the chat, but know that this is, oh, good. I see someone in the chat said, I finally got my personal AI coach browser window going on my Windows laptop. Good. And I'm hoping that this is just a good starting point. So even if that, and so again, you don't have to type every single thing on here, but for the sake of time, I'm copy pasting that prompt. So it's not quite me vibing with the chat. I'm very purposefully trying to make the best use out of our last few minutes here. But what this is going to do, and like even in my chat here, it says create a 20 list adversarial test case in evaluation.py. I don't know where the HTTP evaluation.py, I didn't type that in on purpose, but I just want to illustrate my point here. Because when you're actually shipping a product, yes, we can make it look, we got a user interface, we're handling the personas, we're structuring the input and output, we're adding timestamps, we're adding languages, we're making it much more usable. But before you ship a product, you would still need to make sure that it's going to behave correctly most of the time, as well as you can. A lot of people create a project or ship a project, and then they don't know what's going to happen if 1 million people start using it until 1 million people start using it. And then they go back to the drawing board. Anybody who uses ChatGPT, we get updates almost every other day because they're constantly, okay, this happened, or people want it to be less agreeable. Now people want it to be more agreeable. So even huge companies like OpenAI are constantly tweaking their models to behave differently. So again, for the sake of time, we're going to keep it all. And so now if we are going to run our evaluation file again, oh, let's see what we did. All right, so this is giving us 20 use cases for vague goals, contradictory constraints, unrealistic timelines, empty or very short things. It's going to give us a pass or fail. Not sure why. Oh, I'm not sure why it's reverting to this. All right, let's debug this in real time. Make sure I saved everything. Still in my virtual environment. All right, so I'm just going to have a little chat here. I don't want to commit that. Let's make sure nothing else updated that I'm ignoring. All right, my evaluation is not running. And I run that terminal command. And this is a good use case for using cursor to debug because it's not doing what I wanted it to do. Running the script to reproduce the error. Checking for VNV, whether dependencies are installed. I should, oh, that's probably why. All right, so I think, oh, I was wondering if my evaluations, so the question in the chat was about benchmarking, and there are specific libraries that can help you with exactly this. I don't have anything necessarily prepared, but if you do some research with ChatGPT or Gemini, there are Python libraries that are built for benchmarking and evaluation. I will say that benchmarking, in my experience, changes. So, like, if OpenAI creates a new tool, they'll show all the things they're really good at, and then competing companies will try to reach the same benchmarks. So, a lot of benchmarking or evaluation in this case, we're not necessarily comparing ourselves to other models. We're more comparing it to our intended use of the product or the app. Is it matching that? Is it going to give people harmful responses? Because a lot of the times, if you're trying to compare yourself to another app, everybody's just constantly changing their benchmarks to highlight what they're doing well. And then everybody else tries to speed up, whether it's reduce hallucinations, improve accuracy, improve memory handling. All right. And this might start going off the rails. So I don't want to detract from what we've already built. Yeah, so this might take a minute, and I'm not sure what exactly broke down here. But our original evaluation did work well. So I don't want us to just start clicking things and accepting things and running things because I don't want to mess up what we've already built, especially with the last 9 minutes left. But so how would you publish this app? So that's a great question. So let's talk about actual deployment for the last few minutes here. So there are several different ways. So essentially, this is a Python app. So you wouldn't be able, you can, it's a great internal tool. 100% you could use this tool, but, oh, and see even our connection. Oh, maybe that's actually what I did wrong. Let me do one thing here. Maybe I need to run our Streamlit. Okay. Well, so right here we have a deploy key. So if you click this deploy key, you can actually deploy this to Streamlit has a community cloud service where you can deploy Streamlit apps. So you could deploy it right here from the screen where you built it. I don't personally use Streamlit Community Cloud. I use other things. So like I personally use Vercel for hosting. Now, with that, I typically build tools that use React, Next.js, and Node.js. So instead of Python, we used Python and Streamlit today. Python handled our runtime in our programming language. Streamlit handled our user interface. When I build full tools for people, they normally want them to look different, whether they want to have company branding on it or specific color schemes. And then you have to combine a more full front end experience with a back end experience. So for us to code that together, that automatically introduces more coding languages, more frameworks. So React would handle the user interface, Node handles the runtime, Next.js handles the API connections. It's just a lot of moving parts and it becomes very fragile very quickly. But when I'm done with a project like this, I push things to GitHub. And then when I go to Vercel, I host things on Vercel. So I pay a monthly fee on Vercel, but essentially Vercel allows me to pull GitHub code. Vercel stores and runs that GitHub code and then serves it at whatever web link I want to give. So I can create a temporary web link for people to access my tool, or I can connect it to a domain that they've already purchased. So like my website, the AIhandyman.ai, I built it all in VS Code, very similarly to this, but it took a lot longer and more complex code. But I built the whole website. Pushed it to GitHub. That's where I store the code. And then I uploaded the code to Vercel to host that code so that people could go to a website. They click on my website and it populates the code. So there are several steps. This is the easiest way right here. If you wanted to use this in your workplace tomorrow or later today or share it with your friends, would be to deploy and sign up for Streamlit Community Cloud, but it's very specifically for Streamlit apps. So it's very specifically for things that we just built that can be more complex Python code, but it's not like a full front-end website or full front-end user experience. It's essentially a very strong backend built with Python with a very light user interface using Streamlit. One of many ways to deploy it. Should you do that without hiding the API key? So yes, you don't publish your API key. So again, might be a lot to get into today, but we do have a git ignore file. So in this git ignore file, we have our env right here. So our environment or our secrets, even as it's labeled here. So essentially my API for OpenAI that I showed you guys how to obtain at the beginning of the session would be hidden. So when I push my code to GitHub and people access it from Vercel, I have to go to Vercel and re-enter my OpenAI key because GitHub, the code stored in GitHub doesn't hold my API key. It holds a placeholder. So I can access it if I push it in cursor like we did at the beginning. And then when I host it, I hide it in Vercel. So the actual place where I'm hosting that website or that tool also has access to my secret key. So it's never hard coded in my code, because then if I share my code with anybody, then they'll see my API key. And then they could potentially build another app with my API key and charge it to my billing account. So it's just like a password. So we need it, but you have to hide it strategically. So in apps like this, when we're building on Cursor, a git ignore file essentially tells the program here, when we push it to GitHub, don't publish these files, including the secret keys. Because if you have a more complex coding pipeline, you might have an API key for your database. You might have an API key for OpenAI. A lot of tools use multiple LLMs, so you'd have to have an API key for every single large language model that you're using. So you absolutely hide those secrets. And then you have to add those hidden secrets to your deployment solution, whether it's a full hosting solution like Vercel or Streamlit Cloud. Please share your LinkedIn link. Yes, so my LinkedIn is I'll drop that in the chat and we are almost done. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this today. And let me drop my LinkedIn in the chat. I do try to cater my content to people that are trying to learn and adapt in this environment. So the last thing, yeah, we have 3 minutes left. So I did real quick. So I actually did populate. So this is my VS Code. So essentially this is VS Code without the cursor overlay. I know it's dark, but I'm only going to show you one really quick thing anyway. We'll see if it even works. So this is just one quick way you would turn it in. So yes, I know it's dark and it's dark blue, but essentially here is my personal AI coach, but I made it with a full front end. So I could make this blue, yellow, I could add branding colors. But the fact that this is built in VS Code, it has a lot more files. There's a lot more to break. It would have been much harder to follow along. So that's why we started with Python. So essentially, you could recreate what we did today in Cursor and you would just vibe code still. Say, I want to focus more on the front end user experience while holding the Python code alive. And you can create things that are much more visually appealing for once you actually create the product and push the product. For our time today, it just would have, I don't even know if I would have gotten people set up to the point to make something like this. But yes, internal tools often do look like this. External tools obviously typically require a little additional styling. But thank you so much. Oh, yes. My website, just for additional information, is theaihandyman.ai. And on my website, I do actually connect to my GitHub. So if you had trouble accessing the GitHub, you can get to my GitHub for there. I am focused on education. I do build websites for small businesses, but my primary goal in life is to help my community, my global community, learn AI along with me. All right. Any last minute questions on there? I liked the responses. Even if I was talking and looking at multiple screens, I could see the hearts and the thumbs up and the things. So that helped me follow along with 200 plus people as far as if people were understanding. Thank you. Now I'm getting flooded with hearts and I appreciate that, guys. I really do. I love connecting with people, and this was a great way to connect with 200 plus people. I appreciate your comments. Absolutely. So we are at time. So I will push the GitHub repository, and that's all I got for you guys. I hear Simplilearn coming back on.
Yes, thank you so much, Tim. Wow, that was such an insightful session. I think it was very exciting to even just be an observer and being a non-technical observer, just trying to understand how this whole system works. It was really interesting. Thank you so much for the time and effort and the energy. Thank you so much for that. So I'm gonna quickly move on. To taking everyone through final few details before we wrap up the session. I know it has gone a little over the time, but I hope everyone can extend a little bit more patience. Firstly, we want to start by saying congratulations to everyone. Kudos to every single one of you who have followed along with STEM and built an AI coach. This is a great, great achievement. And those of you who have had some issues, please do not worry. There must have been a lot of learnings from this session anyway, so please do wait for us to send a recording on email so that you can revisit it and follow along at your convenience and at your pace. And if you have any queries, if you are stuck somewhere, please do feel free to write to us at webinars@simplilearn.net and we will get back to you. So yes, just want to say that what you have achieved here is not just about building an AI tool. This accomplishment is not just about this AI coach or this web framework, etc. So it's a lot about the skills that you have learned today. It might not really seem that way because we learned it in a very, very practical way. But if you were to break down all that you did today as part of the workshop and map them to an AI skill, then guys, you've acquired a load of skills today. So did you write a layered system prompt? Then, hey, that's some prompt engineering skills you worked on. Did you evaluate your output with test cases? Then you built some LLM evaluation skills. Requirements engineering, memory design, AI system design, AI product development loop. These are all some of the other skills that you might have touched upon today. And well, you can talk about it maybe confidently in an interview as well. If you're looking to enter the AI field. Right, but is that all enough to convince an employer to hire you or promote you or give you more initiatives and projects to lead? Well, maybe not, because there's always a lot more to learn. There's always a lot more systematic, consistent, and comprehensive approaches to learning generative AI and, well, specialize in it. But if you've learned say 4 5 skills in just 3 hours, imagine what you can achieve in a 16-week program with more amazing mentors and experts like Tim, right? So that's why we bring you the Applied Generative AI Specialization program, which is in collaboration with Microsoft as well. So it's a live, online, and interactive program with a dynamic AI curriculum. You will learn agentic AI, deep learning, LLMs, track pipelines, AI literacy, and a lot more. You will get to work on 7+ projects with guidance from experts. So you walk away with a lot of practical learning, such as from this workshop too, and plenty of opportunities to apply all your learnings. And the learning part of the curriculum is very aligned with what the industry demands right now, from a foundation on AI literacy to advanced generative AI, like models and architecture, building LLM applications, AI frameworks. There is a lot that you will get to learn as part of the program. And for Microsoft curriculums that you complete, you will also be getting a Microsoft completion certificate. So, yes, like I mentioned before, this is a very project first program. There are a lot of projects in it that you can, that can be part of a solid portfolio. You can showcase it and present yourself a lot more confidently in interviews, especially if you're a fresher. All these projects will help you gain a lot of hands-on skills. And yes, the generative AI specialization program exposes you to learning a lot of latest AI tools as well, like some of them that we really touched upon and got a glimpse of in this 3 hour session. And yes, you'll be working, acquiring a lot of hands-on skills as well, more than like 20 skills to be exact. Tim, I would love for you to come in here as founder of an AI company, mentor of our generative AI programs. What do you think about these skills? How important are these skills and tools from the point of view of a recruiter, say?
Absolutely. It's very important. And I also just want to say that even just looking at this slide, it can feel overwhelming because it's a lot of tools, it's a lot of data. And even just getting exposed to all of this information and these different tools helps you have better conversations and more targeted conversations, whether it's with other AI developers or people interviewing you for a job. So I just want to say, even if it looks like a lot of information, you have to start somewhere. And so programs like this with Simplilearn, I mean, I've taught several cohorts and I know from at the beginning, it's a lot of information, but even just getting exposed to the terminology and then seeing how, like, okay, I've heard LangChain, but now I see LangChain. It might be confusing the first time you see LangChain, but once you see it a couple times in class or in another space, then you start to know how to build with LangChain. So you have to start somewhere. So you have to start hearing the terminology and then learning the terminology and then practicing the terminology and the tools. And then you'll be better prepared to talk about it in an interview and on your resume and in your portfolio. So there is a lot of information. And I encourage people to just try to be a passive absorber of all of the details and the terminology, because generative AI is where we're headed next. So even a year ago when I was teaching these concepts, it was more about how to build machine learning models, but now we have such great models like ChatGPT and Gemini. The generative AI really focuses on how to harness this amazing power we've achieved with large language models and turn it into usable products. And prompt engineering, foundational Gen AI, it's all great information, and it helps you have more directed and intelligent conversations about it, both with people interviewing you and with open source communities and things like that. So absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for pitching in, Tim. So, in case anyone is wondering, if this is going to clash with your work schedule, with your office, and let us tell you this learning environment. This program with Simplilearn is designed keeping you in mind. You will have different cohorts giving you weekday, weekend options. You can choose based on what fits your schedule. You will always have access to recordings in case you miss any class, and you will have a peer community of professionals and experts that you would constantly get to network with. So it is very in tune with what working professionals need currently. And if you're wondering what after the program, then let me quickly take you through Simplilearn's job as a support. You will be getting networking and collaboration opportunities with peers, industry mentors, which can often lead to valuable career insights. There's also structured interview preparation support, including guided practice and mock assessments, so you know what to expect when you start interviewing. In addition, you can benefit from AI powered resume assistance and LinkedIn profile enhancement as well to grab any hiring manager's attention. And you can explore a curation of hand picked job opportunities that will match your skills and goals. And all of this has been designed to support you well beyond the classroom. So, those of you who are interested, here are the program investment details. Um, for Indian learners, the fee is 1,19,999 with monthly installments starting at just 5,373 rupees. For US learners, the fee is $2,699 with installments starting at just $270 a month. And for our audiences from other parts of the world, we're sorry we're not able to share the program investment amount exactly in your currency, but you can access all the details here. You can download the syllabus also from this link. So if you are interested to enroll in the program, please drop your answers now. Even if you have any queries, need more details, you can click on yes, and our expert advisor will be getting in touch with you to guide you forward. And if you need more details or need to download the syllabus, like I mentioned, you can scan the QR or access the link that I've shared on chat. Right, great. Tim, while we have answers coming in for the poll, we can look at a couple of questions quickly. Uh, there have been a lot of questions in the Q&A box, but I have managed to just pick out a couple of ones that might be relevant and interesting to everyone. The
Okay.
first one is, why do we need to learn vibe coding at all?
So I think that you need to learn vibe coding, or, well, not everyone needs to learn vibe coding, but if you want to build apps with generative AI, you have to learn vibe coding because um, uh, you could go learn Python, but like even just some of the website I showed you at the very end, that has Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, Tailwind, CSS. So there's four coding languages in there with multiple frameworks. So without vibe coding, you would have to spend time learning every single coding language to then go in and code. So vibe coding can essentially take away that obstacle of having to learn all of these coding languages from scratch, but it also helps you organize your coding projects in industry standard formats, whether it's how you're organizing your file structures, how you're calling your APIs, how you're connecting different tools. So vibe coding kind of just accelerates the process of getting your idea to production. Some people combine vibe coding and then they hand over their vibe code project to their technical team and say, hey, I have this great project or this great idea. Now I visualized it. Can you take it and make sure it's safe with authentication, security, and all of that? So vibe coding, even if you're not the one producing the final product, it often helps you explain your idea or visualize your idea in a much more efficient and much more contextually relevant for the coding environment. It just helps you expand upon your ideas quickly. You can also demo things to clients or to other people very quickly without having to do a full front to end recreation and coding yourself. So it helps in a fast-paced AI environment. It helps you keep up. It helps you at least present your ideas in a different way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim. I hope that answers the question. I'm going to end the poll to enroll in the program now. And I'm going to quickly talk about another exciting webinar that we have coming up. It is a career masterclass that's going to guide you through an ideal roadmap to reach a high-paying AI ML role. We're going to break on the skills you need, how you can acquire them, and what are some super cool up and coming AI ML roles in 2026. It's happening on the 17th of March, 7 p.m. ET, which might be 18th of March to those from India and a few other parts of the world as well. It's a 1 hour session that's going to be led by one of our mentors, Basil Daklala. Please scan this QR code and register if you are interested. I am also going to share a link to register for the webinar if required. So in case if there is any confusion about the timing, please ensure to add the webinar to your calendar so that you get the date and the time as per your time zone. So we really do hope to see you there. Good to know about the attendance certificate. I am launching another poll now to take your entries for the certificate. Yes. So please enter your full name. We don't need your email ID. It is already registered with us. So you just need to give your full name that you want on the certificate, and we will be able to generate the certificate with you and share it on email within the next 48 working hours. It's not going to immediately come to you. It will take about a couple of days for us to generate this and share it with them on email. Right. Tim, maybe the last question that we can take in the session. This is about, I just lost the tab, just 1 second. Okay.
So yeah.
If when you build a code using these programs, do you own the rights to these code?
Whew, that's a great question. So yes, to an extent. So absolutely, when you code something, you own the code logic. I will add a couple caveats there. So a lot of what we built today is just essentially the very basic way to put things together. Especially when you're vibe coding, we didn't get into hyper personalization. So it's very much what I referred to as boilerplate code earlier. It's kind of just the standard way to make certain objects and variables within that programming language. So we didn't really create anything that was super inventive or super original. But I could code something that if I coded something that scraped somebody else's website, then I'm encroaching on odd territory there. Because if I'm pulling information from a place that I didn't have permission to pull from, then my code might be doing something. So I still own the code base, but that doesn't mean it's 100% safe, secure, and doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So when you code something, you own the code, but you're also responsible for what the code does. So you want to make sure that there aren't negative repercussions from what your code is doing. So yes, you own the code when you build it, even with vibe coding, but that doesn't mean that you can just create absolutely anything that pulls information from anywhere. You still have to be cognizant of responsible AI practices and ethics as far as not taking information from sources you shouldn't have it to incorporate it into your code. So you do own the code, but I don't want to say just because you vibe coded it, it's perfect. You still have to make sure you're not taking code from other people and enhancing your code with it. But even with image generation, if you generate an AI image, you own that image. But if you create an AI image of Taylor Swift and post it online, you're going to have other consequences. So same thing with your code. If you create code, you own it. But still, if your code does something illegal or nefarious, you're responsible for the fact that the code did something it shouldn't do. So yes, you own the code, but be careful with that knowledge because you still are very responsible for what that code does and how that code behaves. Oh, I don't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. Thank you, Tim. To all the participants, thank you very, very much for spending the last 3 hours with us. We hope that you'll be able to apply the learnings from this session, as well as what you'll get from the Applied GenAI Specialization program to get ahead in your career. Have a great day. Thank you. And Tim, of course, thanks a lot for much of your guidance and sharing your knowledge. You've been extremely engaging, patient, and full of information and insights today. Do you have any final remarks to share? Any advice for our learners?
My overarching advice for most AI learners is try not to get overwhelmed. It's a ton of information, especially at the beginning. But if you just absorb that information and then find what you understand, I also tell people to gravitate towards AI tools and resources that enhance what you already do well. So even if you're career switching, if you're a great programmer, you can use AI to enhance the speed at which you program. If you're a great social media content creator, then you can use AI to enhance that. So you don't necessarily have to start all over at the beginning of everything you know when you learn AI. AI can improve almost any domain, almost any educational field. So try to focus on tools that enhance what you already do well or what you're already interested in. And then it'll help you connect to those AI terminologies, tools, and things so much quicker if you use it to amplify what you already do well as opposed to just starting from brand new scratch with everything.
Great. And with those wise words, we're wrapping up the session. If anyone has any concerns or questions that we were not able to address, or even any feedback to share, please write to us at webinars@simplilearn.net. And yes, thank you once again to everyone, to them as well. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.